Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Bodhisattva Potter. This is a story about two lovers who met in school and wanted to spend all their free time together, believing their love would last forever. However, they were unaware of how brutally their happiness could be shattered by an unexpected tragedy. Bodhisattva Potter was born in 1991 in Newport Beach, California to Rick Potter and Scherzer. Bodhisattva also has an older brother named Zen. At the time of Bodhisattva and Zen's birth, both parents were in their 30s, and soon after, the family experienced significant career growth. Scherzer is a psychologist who specializes in working with autistic children. Her husband is a psychotherapist and also provides medical consultation. From a young age, Bodhisattva was very intelligent and kind. She was humble and maintained good relationships with everyone around her. All her teachers recognized her intellectual talent. Bodhisattva was also passionate about sports, especially gymnastics and basketball, and she pursued these hobbies and won several awards for her achievements. She also played the piano and sang. Her parents divorced in 1998. At the time, Bodhisattva was 8 years old and living in Newport Beach with her mother and brother. They moved to Hollandale, California, a small desert town with a population of just 6,000, about 2 hours away from their old home. Hollandale is an isolated community with a strong sense of community, with two large lakes that make it feel like an oasis in the desert. The town has about 2,000 homes and a well-developed sports and recreation infrastructure, making it feel like a small resort. Bodhisattva was accepted into the Lewis Center, an academy whose curriculum prepares students for entry into top universities. At this time, Zen moved back in with his father, and Bodhisattva stayed with his mother. Despite the distance, the two brothers often spent weekends and holidays together. Initially, Bodhisattva and her mother rented a house. In 2004, when she was 12 years old, her mother bought a plot of land near a lake to build her dream home. Bodhisattva was actively involved in the design of the new house, but the construction process took longer than expected due to high costs, so they continued to live in the rented house during this time. On Bodhisattva's 13th birthday, she gradually became more mature. She began to seek independence. Her mother recognized this change and allowed her daughter more freedom. Over time, Bodhisattva became interested in Hollywood and dreamed of becoming a film producer. By 2007, she was in high school and began dating Christopher Cody Thompson, her first love. They were a perfect match, sharing many interests in film, psychology, and architecture, and they enjoyed exploring abandoned buildings together. Cody, born in 1989 in Victorville, California, is 2 years older than Bodhisattva. He has two older sisters, Sarah and Katie. Cody is a young man passionate about nature and cycling, and he enjoys restoring custom bikes with his father. At the time he met Bodhisattva, Cody had been working as a teaching assistant for 2 years. People generally describe him as friendly and outgoing. Scherzer was surprised to find out that her daughter had a boyfriend. She felt that it was too early for her daughter to start a relationship and was prepared to intervene if necessary. However, as a psychologist, she realized that she needed to accompany her daughter. She understood that her daughter was growing up and that this journey could not be controlled by restrictions alone. Initially, she considered Cody to be a bit rude, which made her feel uncomfortable. However, as they began to communicate, they found common ground. The Scherzer soon realized that her initial judgment about Cody was wrong. He turned out to be a good person. She felt more secure about her daughter's relationship. Cody graduated from high school and began working for the family business, which helped him become financially independent. He was able to support himself and even buy his own car. He has a passion for exploring old buildings, so he scheduled a visit to an old military bunker that had been repurposed and is now open to the public. Initially, the place attracted many adventure lovers. Over time, it became a popular place for teenage parties. However, the place was not safe. The bunker was often used by addicts to do drugs, and people also came here to practice shooting for themselves. Despite these risks, Cody still wanted to visit because of its uniqueness. Many of his friends knew about it but disapproved of his hobby. However, Cody was attracted to the place and liked the feeling of being in a secret location. In December 2007, after turning 18, Cody planned to take his 16-year-old girlfriend, Bodhi, to the bunker to show her the place they both loved for exploring abandoned sites. Excited by the idea, Bodhi invited her mother to join them. Her mother, Scherzer, objected to the idea. She was shocked by the plans the couple had made. Scherzer warned that the place could be dangerous and forbade Bodhisattva from going there. Although Bodhisattva understood her mother's concerns, her rebellious teenage spirit got the better of her. She did not fully understand the dangers of the place. Despite her mother's warnings, she was determined to explore the bunker. In January 2008, Scherzer was in Newport on business. While her mother was away, Bodhisattva had a few days free to do whatever she wanted. She decided to take the opportunity to visit the shelter. At the time, Cody had planned to take 30 people from the school to the abandoned shelter in the woods. To get to the abandoned building, she asked her friend Andrew to drive her there. He picked Bodhisattva up from home and drove her there on the evening of Friday, January 4, 2008. Bodhisattva hid her intentions from her mother and brother. She told her brother that she was going to see their mother, while she assured her mother that she would stay home with her brother. Bodhisattva was clever enough to make her story sound believable, and her family believed her. On the evening of January 4th, when she and Andrew arrived at the bunker, several cars were there, including those of Cody and his friends. Everyone was enjoying the music and having a good time. Their group was quite large, making them feel safe. The teens explored the empty bunker and had fun until about 4 a.m. When everyone started to leave, Cody and Bodhisattva decided to stay and sleep overnight in his car under the stars, taking advantage of the time when their mother was not there. Bodhisattva and Cody fell asleep until Cody received a call from one of his friends. The friend had lost his iPad, but Cody found it in a car and promised to return it at their next meeting. After the call, Cody went back to sleep and did not contact anyone again. Around 4:30 a.m., Scherzer woke up with a sharp pain in her chest, feeling as if she had been stabbed. She felt worried about her daughter, but decided to wait until 6:30 to call Bodhisattva. It was their family's habit to start the day with a short conversation to ask how everyone was doing. However, when Scherzer called, Bodhisattva did not answer. Scherzer tried to call her daughter, but the call was unsuccessful. She then contacted Zen and discovered Bodhisattva's lie. Zen thought her sister was with their mother, while the mother believed Bodhisattva was with Zen. They discovered that Bodhisattva had gone with Andrew, who had picked her up from home and had taken her somewhere, leaving her family worried and angry. Scherzer also tried to contact Andrew, but was unsuccessful. Scherzer, who was in another city at the time, decided to contact the police. At that time, Bodhisattva had not been reached for about 10 hours, but the police explained that it was not enough time to officially classify her as missing. The police initially thought that Bodhisattva had simply run away or gone out with friends. Meanwhile, her mother felt helpless because she was far away. Scherzer's worries grew when she called Cody's mother, who had also not seen her son since the night before and was extremely worried. They began contacting all of their son's friends and discovered that the two had attended a party at an abandoned bunker the night before, and no one had heard from them since. This was Bodhisattva's mother's worst nightmare, as she considered the location to be one of the dangerous. Zen and his friends quickly arrived at the location and found Cody's car parked outside an abandoned building. Both the driver's and passenger doors were wide open, which added to their worries as there was no one inside. Zen and his friends grabbed flashlights and entered the building. The search continued for several hours, with them splitting up and searching different areas of the bunker. Eventually, one of the friends discovered Cody in a room of the abandoned building. He showed no signs of life. The most alarming detail was that Cody was missing an eye. And Bodhisattva was still missing. Zen immediately called 911 to report the incident. Around 3 p.m. that day, Cody's mother received a call informing her that her son had been shot. Upon hearing this, Bodhisattva's mother was extremely panicked, although she still held on to a faint hope that her daughter was alive. She then quickly went to the shelter to look for her daughter. Meanwhile, the police were on their way to the scene, but the journey took a long time. When the police arrived, they searched the bunker area, and some police were outside to question those who had witnessed the incident. The bunker was complex and confusing, like a maze. Inside, it was so dark that even the light of a few lanterns could not help the police gather information. The teenagers who found Cody's body helped the police locate him. He had a serious gunshot wound to the head, which caused him to lose an eye and eventually die. Cody's body was removed from the bunker, but the search did not end there. Because it was so dark inside, the police had to wait for generators and lights to be installed inside the bunker. Later, near where Cody's body was found, police also discovered Bodhisattva's body in the hallway. She had suffered gunshot wounds to the chest and head. There were no signs of rape. The weapon used was determined to be a handgun. Both victims had multiple wounds to their bodies. Unfortunately, there were no surveillance cameras inside the shelter. Police began questioning everyone who was at the party that night, hoping that someone might have seen something unusual. This information could be crucial in solving the case. None of the victims' belongings had been stolen, not even the iPad had been left in the car. There were no signs of sexual assault or struggle. Police were piecing together what might have happened on the night of the murder. After Cody's final phone call, the attackers forced the young couple out of the car and took them to a dark shelter, where they were shot one by one. It appears that Bodhisattva tried to escape but was caught at the end of the hallway and shot. The shocking murders of Bodhisattva and Cody caused widespread public outrage. Such a dangerous military site was easily accessible. It was not fenced, locked, or monitored. As a result, a debate arose over the demolition of the abandoned building. During the investigation, police learned that several years earlier, a young man had encountered a group of dangerous men in the area. The men were clean-shaven and acted aggressively, suggesting they were members of the same gang. However, the men were never seen again after that encounter. In their investigation, the police focused on a call made by a friend to Cody at 4:30 a.m., when Cody was still alive. Bodhisattva's mother then attempted to reach her daughter at 6:30 a.m. but was unable to make contact. This timeline indicates that the tragic events leading to the double murder occurred between these two calls, starting after 4:30 a.m. A large amount of evidence was collected at the crime scene. Forensic scientists had to analyze thousands of fingerprints and hundreds of spent cartridges, as well as a large amount of trash in the abandoned building, to determine what was related to the case. In addition, the victims' computers were confiscated for valuable information. Police believe that Cody and Bodhisattva may have had an argument with someone, leading to the attack. During questioning, some friends who attended the party recalled that 3 strangers entered the basement. These strangers, aged 17 to 18, arrived in a Honda Odyssey van around midnight and asked to join the party. They were allowed to stay and brought alcohol to share. Cody's group thought they were normal teenagers and didn't suspect anything unusual. However, none of Cody's friends could remember when the strangers left the party. On January 13th, the police received a crucial tip from Sean, an informant. He revealed that his friend, David Smith, had called him on the night of the murders, inviting Sean to a bunker for shooting practice. Sean declined the invitation. A few days later, David contacted him again, sounding very concerned. Sean asked David about recent events, and Sean received a vague answer that alluded to a serious crime. This led Sean to suspect that David might be involved in the double murder at the bunker, so he reported his concerns to the police. Police later interviewed a key witness, who identified David Smith as a 19-year-old from Limestone, about an hour and a half from Holy Dale. On the night of the murder, David and his friends Colin McLaughlin, 18, and Cameron Thompson, 16, had set out for a fun night out that turned deadly. They drove Cameron's mother's SUV into the desert, where they stumbled upon a bunker party. The teens gathered there became their targets, leading to the tragic events that unfolded. In 2007, David, a former high school track and field athlete, lost his athletic scholarship to the University of California, Riverside after a disagreement with the head coach. Unable to pay for college, he was expelled and moved in with his friend Cameron, who then introduced him to Colin. The three quickly became close friends, but their aggressive behavior scared the local residents. The three criminals were arrested on January 17th. But all three denied any involvement in the crime. During a police search of their home, the police found the murder weapon. In addition, blood was found on clothing and shoes, and tests confirmed that the blood belonged to Bodhisattva and Cody, who were murdered. Friends who were present at the bunker that night identified the attackers as strangers who had brought alcohol to the party. All of the teens came from troubled families. Colin's father was a police officer, which gave them access to the weapon used in the murder. Colin, considered the ringleader of the group, had struggled with mental health issues since he was 5 years old. By the age of 17, Colin had attended 7 different schools and had spent some time in an adult detention center. He had significant difficulties adapting socially, which were made worse by his use of alcohol and drugs. During the investigation, many witnesses reported his troubling behavior. Colin even confided in friends that he had thoughts of killing. When he was angry or had an argument with his parents, he would often threaten to kill them. As Colin entered his teens, many people began to fear him, especially when he started talking about mass murder online. During a search of Colin's belongings, police discovered evidence that he had a history of violence. Colin had repeatedly threatened to kill others, including writing detailed notes about shooting up classmates. While in school, he was evaluated by a psychiatrist and diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and he was put on medication. At age 16, Colin faced court charges for attempting to build an explosive device, a year before he killed Bodhisattva and Cody. He was placed in juvenile detention and, upon his release, was placed on probation for several months. Prior to the killings, he had stopped taking his bipolar medication. The suspects, Colin McLaughlin, Cameron Thompson, and David Smith, have not confessed to the crime. However, during pre-trial hearings, Colin was identified as the primary perpetrator of the murder and was released on $2 million bail. He faces a potential prison sentence of 111 years. In contrast, David Smith's bail was set at $1 million and he faces up to 81 years in prison for his involvement in the crime. In February 2009, the prosecutor's office announced its intention to pursue the death penalty against Colin, while David and Cameron were likely to receive life sentences. The defense argued that Colin, who suffers from bipolar disorder, should receive treatment instead of being detained or executed. As a result, a psychological evaluation was ordered. In 2010, 2 forensic psychiatrists evaluated Colin and determined that he was mentally sound and aware of his actions at the time of the crime, meaning he was sane and competent to stand trial. Bodhisattva's mother Scherzer believed that the killer should not be executed. She felt that the appropriate punishment would be imprisonment for all 3 criminals so that they could understand the severity of their actions. The case took a long time to resolve, lasting more than 4 years due to discussions about the evidence and the ages of the criminals. It was eventually decided to try the criminals as adults. In 2011, Cameron Thompson reached a deal with the prosecution. He pleaded guilty to manslaughter and attempted robbery. He agreed to testify against his 2 friends. Cameron explained that the 3 of them had planned to rob a car in the desert, but when they arrived, they found no one there. Instead, they stumbled upon a party in a nearby bunker. Initially, they asked to join and gain the trust of the teenagers at the party. But there were too many people and they realized that this was not the right time to strike. They decided to wait until most of the teens had left before attacking anyone. The criminals hid in a truck, armed with guns, and were not detected by Cody. When the couple fell asleep in the truck, the criminals sprang into action. They forced the sleeping couple out of the truck at gunpoint and took them to a dark, secluded area of the bunker. There, they forced the couple to their knees, and Cody was shot execution style. Bodhisattva tried to escape but was caught and shot by Colin. They then returned to Cody and shot him again. Unfortunately for the criminals, the couple had no valuables, so the robbery was unsuccessful. They then left the bunker and went home. As part of the deal, Cameron was sentenced to life in prison. Although he had the right to apply for parole, his request was denied and he remains in custody. Colin also accepted a plea deal. Colin remained mostly calm throughout the trial. However, there were instances where he laughed, stuck out his tongue, or acted defiantly, suggesting underlying mental health issues. As a result, Colin was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. In 2016, David Smith, a third defendant, also reached a deal. For his cooperation with police, he was sentenced to 50 years in prison and was eligible for parole after 12 years. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Shannon Starbuck. Shannon was born on April 19, 1969, in Anderson, Indiana. She was the youngest child in her family and grew up with 2 older brothers. However, her life changed dramatically when her parents divorced and remarried, giving her more siblings. From a young age, Shannon dreamed of having a large and loving family of her own. She often participated in church activities and had a deep faith, which reinforced her dream. Shannon grew up in a simple and friendly environment. She had a passion for painting and won many awards. When she was 20, she met Clay Starbuck, a 25-year-old man. They met at a party in Florida, where Shannon had moved with her family when she was a child. Clay Starbuck, originally from Alaska, came to Florida during his vacation. During their first meeting, Shannon learned a lot about Clay, including that he had attended a diesel mechanic school in Colorado after high school. He then returned home to work on the Trans-Alaska Pipeline and was financially stable. However, Shannon also learned that Clay was married and had 2 children from that marriage. Despite this, she was not discouraged by his complicated past. Instead, she saw it as a positive thing, believing that it gave him valuable experience for his married life. After getting married, Shannon and Clay moved in together. In the new place, Shannon had to overcome many difficulties related to the environment and weather, but she eventually adapted and settled down. However, married life was not as perfect as Shannon had planned. Shannon and Clay were often apart because of Clay's work, but their love helped her overcome her loneliness and wait for the day they could reunite. During that time, she cared for Clay's children from his previous marriage and had more children. In 1996, the Starbucks family welcomed their son Austin, followed by his brother Blake 3 years later. When their daughter Logan was born, the family was even more excited. However, Logan was soon diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, adding to the challenges of family life. Shannon had to deal with Logan's illness and try to support her daughter. She became a more caring and nurturing mother to her children. She spent time on health care, education, and community activities. But while she focused on raising her family, she did not realize that her husband was having an affair at work. As time passed, the Starbuck family continued to grow, and Shannon welcomed another daughter, Serena. Despite the hardships of life, she still tried to keep her family happy. But her husband's secret eventually came to light, and it would change her life forever. In 2000, Shannon filed for divorce after experiencing a great shock and feeling deeply betrayed. However, she still had feelings for Clay and decided to move to Arizona to start a new life. This attempt failed because she still loved Clay. When Clay contacted her and begged her to come back, Shannon believed that he had repented and decided to give him a second chance. In 2001, Shannon and Clay welcomed their fifth child, Marshall. However, Marshall's birth created new disagreements. Even an official remarriage in 2006 could not save their broken relationship. After the remarriage, the family moved to Deer Park in Spokane County, Washington. Clay continued to work at his previous job, which led to him being away from home often. Shannon had to manage her family and children on her own. However, suspicion continued to poison their marriage, which was affected by the long separations and breakups that occurred during their relationship. Finally, in 2010, Shannon and Clay divorced for good. When she turned 40, Shannon decided to rebuild her life once again. She still hoped that she could experience the joy of love. She was also determined not to repeat the mistakes of the past. Even when Clay was seriously injured, she chose not to get back together with him. Instead, she chose to support her ex-husband and provide help when needed. In February 2011, Clay quit his job and decided to settle down permanently in Deer Park. This brought him closer to his children and also closer to Shannon. However, he still hoped that Shannon would come back to him, but Shannon did not share the same views. After finding freedom, Shannon enjoyed her new life. Austin and Blake then moved in with their father, and they were happy to be away from their mother's constant supervision. Shannon found a part-time job and enrolled in a dental assistant course after her divorce. She had to take care of her family and provide for her children, especially when her ex-husband stopped paying child support due to illness. However, she still had another man to support her in case of emergency. Her children often stayed with this man every Wednesday and on the second and fourth weekends of the month. After completing the course and receiving her certificate, Shannon was proud and began to pursue a new dream. She created a profile on a dating website, hoping to meet a man who was worthy and could help her forget her past. She still regretted spending so many years with Clay, a man who did not appreciate her. However, one morning in December 2011, her dream was suddenly ended. On December 2, 2011, the police were notified that Shannon was unreachable. Her ex-husband, Clay Starbuck, was the first to report. He reported that he had not been able to contact his ex-wife since December 1 around 3 p.m. Shannon had texted her daughter that she could not pick them up from school because she was not feeling well and asked her father to pick them up. However, his phone was turned off, so he did not know about her text. The two children, Marshall and Serena, were tired and hungry. As a result, Logan, 15, decided to call his brother and ask him to drive them to their father's house, which was a few blocks away. When they arrived, Austin said he had not been able to contact his mother either. She may have turned off her phone to rest and recover. Austin took the children to Clay's house. Clay was not expecting them but was very happy to see his children again. After the divorce, the older children lived with him, while the three youngest children lived with their mother. So the father decided to enjoy his time with his children and not bother Shannon. On December 2nd, Clay drove the children to school and went to Channon's house. However, the front door was locked and the blinds were drawn. Since he did not have a spare key, he could not enter the house. Clay then sent a text message saying that if Channon did not show up by 7 p.m., he would contact law enforcement. Time passed without Clay receiving a response from Channon, so he went to the police and reported the situation. 2 sheriffs went to the address provided but did not see anything suspicious and returned. The sheriff suggested waiting another day, and if she had not contacted him by then, he should return. Frustrated, Clay went home and waited for news. The next day, Clay went to the police station again. This time, the police told him that he was not the only one reported missing. A friend and Channon's mother were also unable to contact her. This did not fit her personality. This time, the police took a more serious approach to the case. Many of Channon's relatives began to worry. After receiving the necessary permission, the police returned to Channon's house to investigate. When they arrived, the police broke the lock and entered. Initially, they saw no signs of forced entry or robbery. Everything seemed to be in its place. However, when they entered Channon's bedroom, they discovered an unexpected detail: a broken statue. Then came the horrifying scenes. Channon, 42, was found lying on her back on the floor of her bedroom in a provocative pose. On her stomach was an erotic massage tool. She had hoped for a better future, but fate did not give her the chance to fulfill her dream. Channon's body was covered in bruises and scratches. The medical examiner's report showed that some of the injuries on her body were caused by a stun gun. There was also evidence that her body had been moved. Channon's cause of death was strangulation. It was the detective's job to figure out Channon's last hours and find the culprit. The police realized that Channon Starbuck had not only disappeared but had also been brutally murdered. Her room looked as if it had been turned upside down. The bed was unmade, the blankets and sheets were missing, and the mattress cover was stained red. Channon's cell phone and diary were on the dresser. Forensic experts focused on this room and examined all surfaces for fingerprints. Some surfaces had been wiped clean, but they found 12 latent fingerprints on the massager and the bathroom mirror. They also found many other traces in common areas for DNA analysis. Experts took samples from under Channon's fingernails on her face and neck. Detectives suspect that Channon was killed after she left the bathroom, then placed on the bed, and finally dragged to the floor. It is worth noting that the removed bed sheets were found in the washing machine, possibly intended to destroy evidence. The detectives needed to gather information about Channon and her lifestyle. So, after the ex-husband calmed down, they questioned him. Clay explained that he and his ex-wife had an arrangement regarding child pickup and drop-off. Every morning, he picked up the younger kids and took them to school, and she picked them up after school. Clay said that on the morning of December 1st, his car broke down a few blocks from home. So he texted Channon, asking her to take the kids to school. He then went home to wait for the car to warm up, thinking that would help it start. Around 11 a.m., he tried to restart the car but was unsuccessful. He gave up and went back inside to take a nap. During that time, his cell phone battery died. To back up his claim, he showed his correspondence with his ex-wife. At first, everything made sense. Furthermore, Clay was very cooperative, handing over his cell phone, DNA sample, and fingerprints. He also confessed that he was worried about Channon because the divorce had made her more vulnerable. In addition, he shared that because she was single, Channon had registered on a dating website and had many admirers. According to Clay, it is possible that Channon had several lovers at the same time. He believes that one of them may have caused her death. However, he could not name them specifically due to a lack of information. During the conversation, Clay sobbed. He explained that accepting the death of his ex-lover was very difficult. After taking his statement, the police let Clay go home. He was faced with informing his children about Shannon's death. The case involving Shannon Starbuck's death has attracted public attention. Investigators interviewed the Starbucks neighbors, focusing on details, especially reports of strange people and vehicles appearing outside her home in recent weeks. An autopsy was performed, and the report found that Starbucks suffered chest injuries consistent with the use of a stun gun. She also suffered 10 broken ribs. The injuries to her head and body were severe and likely caused by a blunt object. Because of the appearance of the injuries, it was difficult to determine the exact time of death. Scratch marks on her body indicated that she had been moved after she was killed. The medical examiner's report indicated that a soft object was used to strangle her, possibly a hand, a towel, or a sheet. A key clue in the case came from the body samples collected, including the DNA of a man, suggesting that the suspect may have been a close acquaintance of hers. Shannon's family hopes the police will quickly find the culprit. Shannon's ex-husband, Clay Starbuck, has cooperated fully with the investigation. He underwent a physical examination to look for any signs of injury on his body, but none were found. As detectives speculated that the culprit may have been injured during the struggle, there was no evidence of that. Shannon's two sons, Austin, 21, and Blake, 18, were also examined. Austin had old cuts on his hands, but he explained that these cuts were from his job at a window factory. In conversations with the two brothers, detectives established some important facts. They learned that their mother often dated men after the divorce, which made them unhappy. The brothers also said they had seen intimate photos on their mother's laptop, which led them to suspect that their mother may have been murdered by a lover. However, it was clear that they both loved their mother and were deeply saddened by her passing. Nonetheless, they did not agree with the changes in her life. In a later interview, Clay was more specific. He said Shannon caused discord in the family when he was away on business. She often met other men, and he even suspected that Marshall might not be his son. However, he still loved Marshall like his own son. He did not agree with some of Shannon's actions, especially the fact that she often brought the children to his house when she went on dates. However, investigators gained a personal view of Shannon and her family after speaking with him, her children, and her relatives and friends. After the investigation, detectives had a complete picture of Shannon in her life. The kindness and concern of those who attended Shannon's funeral on December 10, 2011, showed that she was an intelligent and sincere person. She was buried in a cemetery in Orlando. Investigators quickly searched for the killer after the incident attracted public attention. The suspect at that time was her ex-husband, Clay Starbuck. Police needed to verify his alibi to eliminate him as a suspect. When the first fingerprint results came back, detectives discovered that the fingerprints did not match any at the scene. Therefore, the police needed to gather more information about Clay Starbuck. They also took samples from his cell phone, laptop, and personal diary. At the same time, they also considered the possibility that other people were involved in the murder. After a thorough examination of Starbuck's cell phone, detectives added several names to the suspect list. One of them was someone Shannon had connected with through a dating site. They discovered that a man named Tom Walker had scheduled a date with Shannon on December 5th, a few hours before her death. They also discovered that Tom and Shannon had been chatting openly and exchanging photos. Tom had asked Shannon to pose for a photo with an adult toy, but she refused. Interestingly, Shannon's body was later found in the exact pose Tom had mentioned. Tom was found within an hour and immediately became a suspect. He explained his activities on the day of Shannon's death, which was confirmed by coworkers and surveillance cameras. John Wilson then scheduled a date with Shannon on December 1st. It was clear from their correspondence that he was not looking for a serious relationship. However, the truth is that John Wilson used a fake name. His real name is John Kinlawn, who works in a completely different field and is married, so he had to keep it a secret. On the day of the incident, John Kinlawn postponed his morning meeting with Channon until later, citing a headache. In the end, the appointment did not take place. After his DNA sample was taken, he was released. His alibi was confirmed, even though his deception was revealed to his family. The investigation continued, and investigators uncovered some important evidence. When they searched Channon's phone, they asked the carrier for more information and discovered something significant. At 9:18 a.m. on December 1st, a 911 call was made from Channon's phone, but someone had deleted it from the call history. Thanks to a request from emergency services, investigators were able to retrieve the call. However, the call contained only crying and other noises before it was abruptly cut off. Investigators also discovered that after the initial call was unsuccessful, emergency services attempted to call back, but the call went to voicemail. GPS data from Channon's cell phone pinpointed her location at home on the day of her death. Notably, these events occurred after she dropped her children off at school and returned home. Therefore, the messages sent a few hours later could not have been from her. The perpetrator was trying to confuse the investigation. Additionally, this person had a close relationship with the Starbuck family. For example, he used a nickname for their youngest son in his correspondence. Upon closer examination of the information, Clay's statements became even more suspicious. He had a motive to end his ex-wife's life because he could not accept the reality of the divorce. Moreover, he had the perfect opportunity to do this because he knew her daily routine. To clarify the suspicion, the authorities decided to track Clay's car route again, this time using street surveillance camera recordings. The results showed that Clay's car was not broken down as he had claimed. Simultaneously, the results of a second DNA analysis from Channon's body matched exactly with Clay's sample. On the morning of December 1st, Clay sent a text message to his ex-wife, asking her to take the kids to school and saying that his car had broken down. While she was away, he entered her home and waited. During this time, he accessed her laptop and found personal correspondence that made him jealous and angry. When Channon returned home, a heated argument ensued that ended in violence. This explains why she was found in an unusual position. This may have been an act of revenge for her newly gained freedom. Clay then stayed at the house and impersonated Channon in text messages. It seems that he had long intended to harm his ex-wife. The words of a friend of Channon's took on new meaning for detectives. In one conversation, the friend mentioned that Clay and Channon's relationship was not normal. Channon confessed that she was fed up with Clay's constant control and criticism. She was afraid of divorce because she feared that he might one day hurt her. Between June and November 2011, Channon contacted the police several times, accusing her ex-husband of stalking her. She felt unsafe even in her own home and therefore did not trust anyone with a key. She eventually managed to obtain a restraining order against Clay, so their communication was limited to text messages. A careful examination of Channon's diary makes it clear that she was not only afraid of her ex-husband but also believed that he was turning the children against her. Clay fabricated lewd stories and portrayed her as promiscuous. The children's reaction to their father's arrest on February 6, 2012, is therefore not surprising. They refused to believe his involvement. The children were unfazed by the fact that a tracking program was found on Channon's laptop and a hard drive labeled Channon's desktop was found in Clay's home, along with printed correspondence. The older children doubted the authenticity of the DNA analysis, believing that the accusations against their father were unfounded and that the case was fabricated. However, the views of law enforcement and other relatives were different. The prosecution was convinced of Clay's guilt, relying on a large amount of physical and testimonial evidence. In June 2013, justice prevailed, and Clay Starbuck was convicted of first-degree murder with aggravating circumstances and disrespect for human remains. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In 2015, Clay's attorney filed an appeal of the sentence, but it was denied. To this day, Clay remains behind bars at the Airway Heights Correctional Facility in Spokane County. Shannon's loved ones mourn her sudden passing, but their hearts are even more broken by the thought that her children sided with their father. He was so obsessed with his ex-wife that, in his quest for revenge, he forgot the consequences, leaving his children orphaned. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Timothy Jones Jr. As a child, Timothy witnessed hardships in his family. His mother suffered from schizophrenia, and her mental health gradually declined. Eventually, she had to leave home to receive constant care. When Timothy was 20, his father moved with him to his grandmother's house. There, Timothy faced domestic violence, substance abuse, and alcohol abuse. Despite his difficult upbringing, Timothy showed an aptitude for mathematics and computer engineering. He could solve problems easily and take apart and reassemble computers to make them run faster. However, things changed when Timothy reached his teens. At age 10, he began hearing voices in his head. By middle school, he was using drugs and drinking excessively. At age 15, he suffered a traumatic brain injury in a car accident that affected the frontal lobe of his brain, the area that controls impulses and is associated with mental illness. After the accident, Timothy exhibited unusual behavior and was very irritable. He felt jealous of his father and believed that anyone who had a relationship with him was causing his father to neglect him. Over time, Timothy believed that his father did not love him and feared being abandoned. Although his intelligence developed, his emotional development was affected, causing him to have a childlike mentality and lack of empathy. After graduating from high school, Timothy Jones Jr. dreamed of joining the United States Navy. His intelligence helped him to study there, but he lacked athletic ability and discipline. He lasted only a few weeks of training and often cried out of frustration. He had difficulty keeping up with the rigorous requirements, which led to depression and a drug test that revealed substance abuse, resulting in his expulsion. In 2000, Timothy began associating with people involved in bad activities. Police found him in possession of illegal narcotics and writing checks in his father's name. The police forced Timothy's father to control his son or face arrest himself. In 2001, Timothy Jones Jr. was sent to a work camp in an Illinois state prison for a year. When he was released, he seemed to have changed, with religion becoming the main driving force in his life. Timothy met Amber while they were both working at an amusement park in Chicago. After a while, in 2004, he invited her to his church. Within weeks, they decided to marry, in keeping with the church's expectation of immediate marriage. Amber was 19 and Timothy was 22. However, Amber soon learned about the strictness of the church. Women were not allowed to cut their hair, wear pants, wear makeup, or wear jewelry. Additionally, Timothy believed that women should submit to their husbands and bear children. Timothy was very religious and devoted to the church. Although many advised him not to take the Bible literally, he persisted. They soon had 3 children, Mara, Elias, and Nathan, each born a year apart. As their family grew, they moved to Mississippi. There, Timothy graduated with highest honors from State University, earning a degree in computer science and engineering. Timothy Jones Jr. was building a family while working multiple jobs, and his family was extremely proud of him. With a promising future, Tim was truly a talented man, and everything seemed to be going well for him. He had secured a job at Intel as a computer chip manufacturer, which his wife, Amber, saw as an opportunity for a better life. After living in student housing in Mississippi, they dreamed of a larger home to raise their 3 children and even considered hiring a nanny. However, things did not go as planned. Timothy bought an old mobile home on a dirt road in Red Bank because he dreamed of living on a farm. He purchased animals to raise, and Amber stayed home to care for them. By 2012, they had 2 more children, and problems began to arise. Timothy wanted Amber to homeschool the children, even though she only had a high school education. Amber felt lonely and isolated, with no family nearby and Timothy's family far away. She felt inferior to her intelligent and educated husband. The tension in Timothy and Amber's marriage increased when Timothy accused Amber of having an affair with a neighbor. Their marriage began to fall apart, and they started to consider divorce. Timothy did not want Amber involved in the children's lives, so he sought the help of a therapist and asked his divorce attorney to declare that he was capable of raising the children alone. Amber, without a lawyer and unsure of what to do, decided that it was best for the children to stay with their father. She felt she had nothing to provide for the children, as she had no job or education. Ultimately, the court decided that Timothy would have primary custody as the sole financial provider, and Amber would be granted regular visitation rights. After leaving her husband and children, Amber faced many difficulties. Meanwhile, Timothy began to lose control and suffer from his failed marriage. He started using drugs and alcohol again and struggled with the voices in his head. He became easily angered over small things. Amber recounted that Timothy once beat her in front of the children until she passed out. Unable to manage work and family, Timothy hired a nanny service to care for the children. The first 2 nannies found Timothy's house very clean and noted that he was dedicated and attentive to the children, but their attitudes changed when they learned about Timothy's condition. On the 3rd occasion, Timothy hired Crystal, a 17-year-old nanny who had a young daughter. Timothy gradually developed feelings for Crystal, and she soon became his lover. Timothy began to pressure Crystal to follow his religious customs, including wearing long dresses, growing her hair long, and being submissive to him. However, when Crystal refused, their relationship deteriorated. Crystal later spoke of how Timothy was too harsh with his children. He forced them to stand on their toes for hours, believing it was good for their weak bodies. Crystal eventually left after witnessing Timothy trying to hit her young daughter. After Crystal left, Timothy hired another nanny. The new nanny noticed a major change in Timothy's home. Once clean, the house was now littered with trash and dirty clothes, and there were even cockroaches. Over time, Timothy became increasingly violent and punished his children daily. He imposed a restricted diet, feeding them only oatmeal throughout the day and limiting them to 1 meal. In August 2014, the nanny contacted South Carolina Social Services to report conditions at Timothy's home. She described the lack of food and physical abuse the children were subjected to. In fact, the violence was so severe that teachers had reported it to the agency months earlier. The agency had previously required Timothy to sign a non-abuse pledge, but the children came to school with bruises and provided evidence linking them to the violence. On the afternoon of August 28, 2014, Timothy picked up the children. At the time, he was very angry about an electrical problem in the house. Timothy took his anger out on his 6-year-old son, Nathan, and repeatedly made Nathan bend down to pick up sand as punishment. Every time Nathan slowed down, Timothy hit him with a belt. While Nathan was being punished, Amber, Timothy's ex-wife, called to talk to the children. She made several calls until Timothy answered at 7:10. During the conversation, Nathan told his mother about the punishment for breaking the outlet, claiming it was an accident. Timothy angrily hung up, telling Amber to stop defending him. After hours of torture, Nathan was exhausted, dehydrated, and begged for it to stop. He passed out, ending it all. Timothy took Nathan to bed and left him without giving him water or help. Call records show that Amber called 8 more times after that. Around 1 a.m., Timothy took his 8-year-old daughter, Mara, to a convenience store to buy 10 packs of cigarettes. When he got home, he strangled Mara. Timothy then went to his 7-year-old son, Elias, and did the same thing. He then unbuckled his belt and strangled Gabriel, 2, and Elaine, 1, until they stopped breathing. When the children did not move, he took a blanket, wrapped each one in it, and placed them in the back seat of the car and drove away. The disappearance of Timothy and his children was reported to the police. The police searched everywhere for Timothy. Fortunately, a police officer stopped his car. As the police approached the car, they immediately detected a foul odor inside. They also noticed that the carpet appeared to have been recently cleaned with bleach. The sheriff asked the driver, Timothy, for identification and license plate number and observed that Timothy appeared to be under the influence of drugs. After checking Timothy's information, the police discovered that he was wanted in South Carolina for a child welfare issue. When asked about the whereabouts of his children, Timothy initially said he had no children, but later mentioned that he had 3 children living in South Carolina. The officers asked for Timothy's relatives' phone numbers to verify the children's safety. After making the call, they immediately arrested Timothy. As Timothy was placed in a patrol car, he became emotional and began telling officers what he had done to his children. He confessed to killing his 3 children for ulterior motives. Timothy explained that he felt very sad and angry when he saw one of his sons playing with an electrical outlet, so he strangled his son until he lost consciousness. Timothy did the same to his other son and his older daughter. He strangled his daughter until she turned blue. In another account, Timothy claimed that his son was trying to hurt him when he saw him playing with an electrical outlet, which prompted him to kill him. In one recording, investigators heard a discussion about Timothy Jones Jr. subjecting his 6-year-old son, Nathan, to hours of punishment. This was because Nathan had accidentally turned off an electrical outlet in the living room. Timothy said he put Nathan to bed afterwards, but when he checked on him, he found him dead. When asked why he did this, Timothy said he heard voices in his head and believed his children were plotting against him. He also thought his children would be happier if they went to heaven. So he decided to kill all of them. After killing his children, Timothy traveled throughout the southeast with the bodies of his 5 children covered in blankets in his car. He eventually dumped them in a remote wooded area in Alabama. In a second statement, Timothy said Nathan's punishment had gotten out of hand. When he went to Nathan's room, he found him dead. Not knowing what to do, Timothy decided to end the lives of all his children. After an autopsy, pathologists were unable to determine a definitive cause of death. However, they theorized that Nathan may have been too weak from the excessive punishment Timothy had imposed on him, making it easier to kill Nathan. Investigators questioned Timothy's actions, particularly why he did not call 911 immediately after the incident. Instead, he attempted to conceal and dispose of his children. Timothy later led investigators to where he had dumped the children's bodies that same day. The remains of the 5 children were found on September 10th. On September 11th, evidence from Timothy's car was collected and turned over to South Carolina authorities. Some of the evidence included family photos, children's clothing, children's drawings, letters from his mother to the children, Timothy's college diploma, and his passport. Notably, Timothy Jones Jr.'s handwritten notes included a list of actions related to the disposal of the bodies, such as moving the bodies, grinding the bones into powder or small pieces, burning the bodies, and preparing necessary items such as camping equipment, gas, and muriatic acid. On September 13, 2014, Jones was admitted to a correctional institution and placed in a special cell separate from the general population. Since then, he has been evaluated by mental health experts, including psychiatrists, clinical psychologists, and forensic specialists. Opinions among these professionals varied. Some diagnosed him with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, schizoaffective disorder, or a personality disorder. They suggested his mental state during the crime might have been worsened by drug use and a traumatic brain injury he sustained at age 15, which could have contributed to underlying psychosis. These theories were presented to the jury during his trial. Conversely, other specialists argued that Timothy was mentally competent and that his attempts to hide evidence, including his children, showed he knew his actions were morally and legally wrong. His internet search history indicated he understood what he was doing and how to do it. The prosecution argued that Timothy succumbed to the pressures of a failing marriage and the challenges of raising 5 young children. According to his statements, the catalyst for his actions was his wife's alleged infidelity with their neighbor, who is now her husband. She testified that she did not commit adultery and that her relationship with the neighbor began only after her divorce. The trial occurred in late May 2019, featuring weeks of intense testimonies and evidence against Timothy. The crime is considered one of the most horrific murders in South Carolina's history. Mara's last words to her father were, "Daddy, I love you." When police searched the house, they found Naten's favorite Toy Story toy broken into pieces. Naten appeared to have been the most severely punished. Nevertheless, all testimonies agreed on one thing: the children loved their father. On June 13, 2019, after 2 hours of deliberation, Timothy Jones Jr. was sentenced to death. He is currently in solitary confinement at a correctional institution, wearing a green jumpsuit that identifies him as a death row inmate. This tragic case ended the lives of innocent children because of marital issues, with both the father and mother making irreversible mistakes. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Kate Waring. Kate Waring was born in Charleston, South Carolina, USA. She grew up in a loving family with 2 siblings, and her parents always tried their best to give their children the best life possible. As a child, Kate showed a deep love and compassion for animals, which led her to start volunteering at various animal shelters at a young age. As a teenager, she was a dancer and had a wide social circle, known for her positive attitude and outlook on life. Everyone assumed she had an educational good background, and to some extent, this was true. However, one fateful day, her life changed completely. Just before going to college, Kate opened up to her parents about being abused by someone close to the family when she was younger. Kate's parents were shocked by this confession. They felt guilty for not knowing the hardships their daughter had faced over the years. After learning this heartbreaking truth about their daughter, Kate's parents did everything they could to help her overcome it, but unfortunately, this traumatic experience left behind long-lasting consequences that became increasingly serious over time. Kate had struggled with addiction to both alcohol and illegal substances. Kate's parents recommended therapy to help her work through her issues, and she agreed to give it a try. They also suggested she move back in with them, thinking the family environment would aid in her recovery. Initially, the therapy seemed effective, but Kate continued to grapple with the emotional weight of her past, making it difficult for her to move forward. Kate's life underwent a major transformation when her psychiatrist diagnosed her with depression. Her father proposed a trip to anywhere in the world, which Kate eagerly accepted. She chose to travel to the Arctic Circle, driven by her long-held desire to see polar bears. Kate and her parents searched for suitable tours and eventually booked a trip. As the journey approached, Kate's parents noticed a marked change in her attitude, shifting from sadness to cheerful and positive. During the trip, Kate and her parents shared a wonderful experience, filled with joy and laughter. On the boat to the Arctic Circle, Kate met a fellow Russian tourist. They kept in touch throughout the trip, and when the trip ended, they still exchanged letters. Kate developed strong feelings for him, and eventually, which led her to make the decision to travel to Russia. Kate had finally begun to overcome her depression after traveling with her family in another country. However, due to visa issues, she was forced to return home. Despite this incident, Kate seems to have found joy in her life again. She planned to resolve her visa problems and had even started writing a book for her children. But everything changed on Saturday, June 12, 2009. Kate's family was away on a business trip, and she was alone at home. Normally, Kate would call her father to check in, but this time she didn't. Her father tried to reach her, but there was no answer. Concerned about her well-being, especially given her past struggles with addiction, her father asked someone to check on her. When the person arrived at Kate's home, they found her room empty, but the light was still on, suggesting that she had just stepped out and would return soon. However, Kate's medication, which she needed to take regularly, was still at home. Her parents were anxious, but they decided not to panic, thinking that Kate, being 28 years old, was capable of taking care of herself. They decided to wait until Monday, at which point her parents intended to contact the police. On Monday morning, Kate's father received a call from the bank. A bank employee informed him that someone had tried to cash a check for over $4,000 from Kate's account. The bank was unable to contact Kate, so they reached out to her father. This situation raised suspicions, as Kate's father knew she only had a few $100s in her account. The bank security team contacted Kate's father due to the large amount of the check. Although Kate's signature on the check appeared to be genuine, the bank still had concerns. The man who tried to cash the check was identified as Ethan Mack. Kate's father did not recognize Ethan's name, but he assumed Ethan might be an acquaintance of Kate's since the bank had verified her signature. As Kate was still unreachable, her father decided to contact the police. The police launched an investigation into Kate's disappearance and began by questioning Ethan Mack. Ethan claimed to have known Kate for years and stated that she had written the check to pay off old debts. He also claimed that he had frequently lent Kate money for various purchases, including clothing and jewelry. Investigations into Kate's disappearance led detectives to speak with her friends. They revealed that Kate had a long-standing friendship with Ethan. Although they were very close, her friends insisted that the relationship was not love. Ethan told detectives that he met Kate on Friday night and took her out for dinner at a restaurant. After dinner, he drove her home and then went about his own business. To support his alibi, Ethan showed detectives text messages he had exchanged with Kate, confirming their dinner plans. He also allowed detectives to search his home, where he lived with his mother, but nothing suspicious was found. However, the police still suspect his connection with the check and did not rule Ethan out as list of suspects. Detectives reconstructed Kate's activities on Friday night to determine her last whereabouts before she disappeared. She had seen her therapist in the afternoon and then visited the gym. Later, Kate entered a store and purchased a bottle of wine. Security footage showed her talking on the phone at the time, and it is possible that she was speaking with Ethan, who later picked her up and took her to dinner. Kate's parents remembered another unsettling detail from the day she went missing. Although she mentioned having some problems, she didn't specify what they were. Unfortunately, her parents did not remember this conversation until a few days later, and by then, the information was too late to be of any help in the search. As the weeks went by, Kate remained missing. Her parents felt frustrated with the police, believing they weren't doing enough to find Kate. However, in August, the case gained new information when a team of former police officers, led by lawyer Andy Savage, took it on. This team had been privately investigating unsolved cases and was particularly drawn to Kate's. The team consisted of 5 individuals, and all have significant experience in the investigative field. One of them, former Detective James Randall, began by examining Kate's bedroom. He noticed 2 suspicious things. Firstly, he found a packet of medication that Kate took regularly. Kate's parents confirmed that she was very diligent in taking her medication, so the fact that the packet was left behind was highly alarming. Next, a team member found Chinese currency on Kate's bed, which raised questions since Kate's parents had no idea where she got it or why she needed it. To gather more information, the team brought in Bobby Mitter, an expert in tracking individuals online. His skills are really useful. Bobby discovered that on the night Kate disappeared, she called her friend James around 10 p.m., but he didn't answer. Kate left a disturbing voicemail, saying someone had stolen her credit cards. Kate's phone was last active at 1:53 a.m., for some unknown reason, when she called her own voicemail. Further investigation by member Lewis revealed that the call was made from James Island, just a few kilometers from Kate's house. Another team member, Eugene Fraser, spoke with acquaintances on James Island and found something suspicious. Ethan Mack, who had allowed police to search his mother's home, didn't actually live there. Instead, he rented an apartment in a nearby building. Eugene's acquaintance, who happened to be Ethan's landlord, provided this crucial information. The detectives dug deeper and discovered that the police had not Ethan thoroughly investigated. They had only done a cursory search of his mother's house. The team decided to take matters into their own hands and began their own investigation. In the process, they found out that Ethan had a girlfriend named Heather Camp. When they asked Kate's parents about Heather, her mother remembered a strange encounter. About a month before Kate's disappearance, Kate had met Heather on a train from Washington, D.C., where Kate was experiencing visa issues to Russia. Heather had told Kate that she had been robbed of her wallet and was now destitute. Kate offered to help and lent her a substantial amount of money. Heather said she has found a job as a pediatric surgeon in South Carolina and will start work soon. Heather later said that her daughter had tragically died in a car accident in New Jersey. Her actions following this announcement seemed irrational and confusing. She did not go there, and her demeanor suggested that her daughter's death did not affect her greatly. Furthermore, they discovered that Heather was facing fraud charges in Indiana. She had impersonated a licensed physician by falsifying paperwork. The team gathered significant data, forcing them to re-examine the case from a new perspective. However, when they presented their findings to the police were completely reluctant to continue the investigation. The team discovered that the only way to get the police to take action was to gather undeniable proof that connected Heather to Kate's disappearance. To obtain this evidence, the team took drastic measures. They convinced the person who rented an apartment to Ethan Mack to install a hidden camera outside his apartment door. Additionally, they placed a GPS tracker in Ethan's car, allowing them to monitor his movements. Their efforts soon paid off. After analyzing Ethan's travel patterns, the detectives discovered that he had visited multiple pawn shops throughout the city. They followed his trail and found that at each shop, Ethan was selling small batches of jewelry. Although they couldn't confirm whether the jewelry belonged to Kate, the detectives felt they were closing in on a crucial lead. The group then hits a major roadblock when Ethan and Heather's landlord threatens to evict them because they haven't paid their rent. This made the detectives' investigation difficult, as losing access to the apartment would hinder their ability to monitor Ethan and Heather's activities. To address this issue, the detectives devised a plan to persuade the landlord to grant Ethan and Heather an extension on their rent payment. In exchange, the landlord required both Ethan and Heather to sign a contract committing to pay the outstanding debt. The team successfully negotiated this arrangement, and once the contract was signed, they immediately sent it to the laboratory for analysis. The primary objective was to compare the handwriting on the contract with Kate's signature on the $4,000 check. The results yielded a significant breakthrough. The handwriting expert confirmed, with absolute certainty, that the signature on the check matched Heather's handwriting on the contract. The team discovered that Heather had forged Kate's signature. However, they knew the police would be uncooperative, so they devised a new plan. They convinced the landlord to help them by telling Ethan that the apartment needed insect treatment. The team leader, dressed as an exterminator, accompanied the landlord to the apartment. But their plan almost failed. They realized Ethan only moved the car away from the house and did not actually leave. Upon entering the apartment, the investigator and the landlord were met with an unexpected surprise. Ethan was still at home, and Heather was the one driving his car. The investigator then had to think quickly and adjust his plan. They insist that the apartment needs to be disinfected and ask Ethan to wait outside while they spray the dangerous disinfectant. Ethan, unaware of the investigation, agreed to leave his apartment. Meanwhile, investigators begin searching for evidence to prove Ethan's involvement in Kate's disappearance. They found Ethan's backpack and examined its contents. Discovering Chinese money, it resembles the bills found on Kate's bed. However, the search yielded no other significant clues. The investigator and the landlord pretended to complete their task and left. The team needed a new strategy. After reviewing the footage from the camera outside Ethan's apartment, they noticed a man frequently entering the building, Terry Williams, a neighbor of the couple. The detective suspected that Terry might have information about Ethan and Heather's involvement in Kate's disappearance. The team decided to take a risk and offered Terry a substantial sum of money in exchange for his cooperation. They visited Terry's apartment with the offer, hoping he would reveal what he knew about Kate's disappearance. Detectives encountered an unexpected situation when they told Terry what was happening. Unbeknownst to them, Heather was at her home and overheard the conversation between the detectives and Terry. When the detectives started talking to Terry, Heather was extremely frightened. She immediately called Ethan and explained the situation in a hysterical state. The investigation team did not expect this, and they spent the next few days coming up with another plan. However, Terry later contacted the detectives and invited them to his home to discuss. Upon arriving at Terry's apartment, he reveals that although Ethan and Heather did not directly tell him about their involvement in Kate's disappearance, but he had suspected that the couple had done something wrong to Kate. Terry then produced an iPod that Heather had given him shortly after Kate's disappearance. He had assumed the iPod belonged to Kate. The detectives examined the device and, using its serial number, confirmed that it indeed belonged to Kate. This discovery provided the investigation team with sufficient evidence to return to the police department. The local police could no longer ignore the case and decided to take action. After reviewing the evidence gathered by the team, they arrested Ethan and Heather. During the initial interrogation, Heather agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. She claimed Kate's body was on Wat Allah Island, approximately 20 miles from her house. However, when the police searched the area, they found no of Kate's body. It became clear that Heather had given them false information. Andy Savage then tried a different approach, suspecting Heather's direct involvement in Kate's murder. He met with her and offered a deal. In exchange for revealing Kate's body location, he would help get her off the forgery charges papers. Heather, seeing this as her only chance, agreed to the deal. She provided a detailed description of the location on the outskirts of Wat Allah Island, claiming Kate's body was still there. The detectives decided to search the area without police accompaniment, but they were initially disappointed when they found nothing. However, they returned the next day, and they eventually discovered Kate's body. The forensic doctors were unable to determine the cause of Kate's death. But the truth eventually came to light when Heather began to confess. In August 2009, Heather signed a confession admitting to murder, obstruction of justice, and bank check forgery. The police investigation revealed that Heather had been committing fraud for years and had targeted Kate as her next victim during a trip from Washington. Heather later met Ethan and started a romantic relationship with him. Ethan, however, did not immediately plead guilty, and his trial began in October 2010. The prosecution used Heather's testimony to reconstruct the incident surrounding Kate's disappearance. According to Heather's account, on the day Kate vanished, Kate discovered that Heather had deceived her and stolen her credit cards. Kate threatened to inform her father. Heather confided in Ethan, who chose to support her despite his long-standing friendship with Kate. The investigation revealed that Kate was not alone with Ethan on the night she disappeared. Heather was also present. It appears that Heather and Ethan attempted to negotiate with Kate at a restaurant, trying to persuade Kate not to expose Heather's deception. During this meeting, Heather may have promised Kate that when she got to Ethan's apartment, Heather would return the stolen credit card to her. Upon Kate's arrival, Heather and Ethan may have been waiting for the right moment to end her life. However, the court ultimately questioned Heather's account of the incident and found her guilty, sentencing her to 39 years in prison. Ethan received a slightly more lenient sentence of 25 years. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Johnny Berry. Johnny Berry was born on August 26, 1983 in the small town of Bristol, Tennessee, USA. She is cheerful, friendly, has many friends, and often goes to parties. While in school, Johnny was a member of the local cheerleading squad. After graduating from high school, she studied psychology and criminology at East Tennessee State University. While in college, she met Jason White. They became a couple, and they got engaged before graduating in late 2004. When Johnny was 21, she decided to continue her studies to get a master's degree in psychology, so she temporarily moved to Knoxville. While studying, she worked part-time at a child education center and realized her passion for helping children. Her boyfriend, Jason, studied law in another state. Despite the distance, they kept in touch and planned their wedding. While in Knoxville, Johnny stayed at a classmate Jason Amami's apartment. They had attended college together and moved to Knoxville together. They shared a 2-bedroom apartment, and Johnny stayed until she found her own place. Johnny had 2 part-time jobs, one at a jewelry store and one at a children's hospital. On the evening of Sunday, December 5th, after working at the store, Johnny went to the mall to do some Christmas shopping. When she got home, she wrapped presents for the children at the daycare center, chatted with her neighbors, and then went to her room. Before going to sleep, she talked to her boyfriend. Around 4 a.m., Jason Amami heard Johnny screaming. He thought Johnny was having a nightmare, so he went into her room, but instead of Johnny, Jason Amami saw a stranger holding a knife. The stranger attacked Jason Amami, and they struggled. He eventually pushed the attacker away and ran out of the apartment. He went to the nearest convenience store, about a mile away, to call for help. The store clerk found him covered in blood and called 911. The police arrived at Jason Amami and Johnny's apartment and found Johnny in the hallway connecting 5 apartments. She was still alive but barely conscious. When asked about her attacker, she gave only vague clues. The police searched the entire building and the surrounding area but could not find the attacker. They took Johnny to the nearest hospital, but despite the doctor's best efforts, she died. The doctor said that Jania had suffered more than 20 stab wounds and that her chances of survival were slim. Meanwhile, Jason Amami had suffered 8 injuries from the attacker, but only one was serious. He was treated and his life was not in danger. At the same time, detectives began investigating the scene. They found blood in the hallway, indicating that Jania had tried to call for help from neighbors, but no one answered the door. Near Jania's room, they found the murder weapon, a kitchen knife owned by Jason Amami. The attacker used the knife with such force that it was bent and damaged. Police also found blood stains near the back door and on the stairs leading to the street. Since Jason Amami and Jania had left through the front door, detectives believe the killer escaped through the back door. In Jason Amami's room, they found another clue, partial footprints that the attacker may have left while stalking and attacking Jason Amami. Because of the brutality of Jania's death, police suspected a personal motive behind the crime. Initially, detectives investigated Jania's boyfriend, even though he lived about 1,000 miles away in Knoxville. However, all of his friends and family said that Jania and her boyfriend had a wonderful relationship and that he had no reason to commit such a brutal act. He learned of Jania's death when her mother called at 10 a.m. to tell him. He said he fainted when he heard the news and it took him a long time to regain consciousness. Unable to do anything, he asked his neighbors to help him book a plane ticket and prepare his luggage. Investigators looked closely at Jason White's alibi and realized that he could not have made it to Knoxville and back in the morning by himself. So they eliminated him as a suspect and turned their attention to Jania's neighbor. This neighbor did not have a solid alibi and had been in the apartment with Jania, raising suspicions that he could be the culprit. Jania's friends and family also suspected this neighbor. Some believed that he could be the killer, while others accused him of fleeing the apartment, leaving Jania behind. The suspicions were so deep that the victim's parents did not even want him to attend her funeral. However, after Jason Amami was discharged from the hospital, investigators began questioning him. He stuck to his original story. He heard screaming, saw a strange man, and was attacked by him. After fighting off the attacker, Jason Amami ran to the front door and onto the street, seeking help from neighbors. He believed that Jania had also escaped from the apartment because he could not hear her screams. However, police had doubts about Jason Amami's story. What initially raised suspicions about Jason Amami were his injuries. 7 of the 8 were superficial, and the last wound to his right arm could have been self-defense or the result of an attack. Additionally, investigators found no signs of forced entry into the apartment, suggesting that the perpetrator may have been someone Jania knew. Jason Amami claimed that he had taken out the trash through the back door that night but did not remember locking it. Detectives continued to press him, paying close attention to the door he used to exit the apartment onto the street. Jason Amami insisted that he had exited through the front door, but police suspected that he might be lying. If Jason Amami had indeed left through the front door, that would not have explained the presence of bloodstains near the back door, further raising suspicions against him. Police accused Jason Amami of using and selling illegal drugs, and of being aggressive when he could not satisfy his addiction. However, he denied all of these allegations. After hours of questioning at the police station, detectives suggested that Jason Amami take a polygraph test. Jason Amami agreed to take the test. The results showed that he gave false answers, which made detectives even more suspicious of him. However, detectives were still unable to charge him with murder due to a lack of concrete evidence. They had to wait for lab experts to complete testing on some of the evidence found in the apartment. They then discovered some key evidence, including 3 DNA samples on the murder knife, samples from Jania, Jason Amami, and an unidentified man. The unidentified man's DNA was also found in Jania's room, on the back door handle, and on the stairs the criminal used to escape to the street. They also found a fingerprint on the handle of the knife, but it did not match Jason Amami's fingerprint. These discoveries led the police to suspect that someone else had been in the apartment that night. However, when they ran the DNA sample against existing databases, they found no match. This complicated the case further, and detectives had to continue investigating to find the real killer. Investigators have ruled out Jason Amami as a suspect, but the public remains uncertain about his role in the incident. They believe that Jason Amami abandoned his friend and ran away instead of protecting her. However, it is worth noting that after the accident, Jason Amami began to suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. A key finding was later revealed: the polygraph operator had misinterpreted the test results, and there was no indication that Jason Amami was lying. Additionally, there was no concrete evidence that Jason Amami was involved with illegal substances. They eventually concluded that this was used as leverage to frame him. More importantly, however, doctors initially underestimated the severity of Jason Amami's injuries. In fact, he had suffered severe damage to his lungs and neck, with little hope of a full recovery. Due to inaccurate information reported about Jason Amami's health, the insurance company only covered 25% of his medical expenses, leaving Jason Amami facing serious financial hardship. After eliminating Jason as a suspect, police began questioning him as a witness. Based on Jason's testimony, they attempted to create a rough description of the attacker. However, this was made more difficult by the fact that Jason could not see the attacker's face clearly. The apartment was too dark and the attacker lunged at him as soon as he entered the room. Investigators also discovered several suspicious items in the room, including a hat, a record player, and a stereo near the back stairs. At first, they thought these items might belong to Johnny or Jason, but Jason denied owning them. This led them to suspect that these items might have been left behind by the killer. Police shared a rough sketch of the suspect with the media, and they subsequently received hundreds of calls from the public. Many people reported individuals who matched the sketch, prompting detectives to pursue each of these leads. One of the prominent clues led investigators to a group of teenagers who had broken into homes with the intention of burglarizing. One member of the group, a 19-year-old named Michael, matched the sketch of the suspect. The police began searching for Michael, but this was not easy because he was wanted for burglary. 2 police units joined the search for him, and they eventually found Michael. When interrogating Michael, investigators immediately noticed his shoes, which had a pattern similar to the footprints left by the killer. They collected Michael's DNA and fingerprints and sent them to experts for analysis. During the interrogation, Michael revealed a surprising piece of information: he and a friend had entered Johnny's apartment that night. According to Michael, they planned to rob, but his friend attacked Johnny with a knife. However, detectives soon discovered inconsistencies in Michael's story. The details he provided did not match the actual events, and there was no evidence of 2 strangers at the crime scene. Michael's DNA and fingerprints also did not match the evidence at the scene. Michael's shoes also did not match the tread pattern in Jason's room. Investigators concluded that Michael had made up the story. This is not uncommon, as some people may falsely confess to crimes in order to seek attention or reward. Michael's motives remained unclear, but his story was completely untrue. Police subsequently interviewed more than 1,000 potential suspects and collected about 400 DNA samples, but none of them matched the evidence at the scene. Early in the murder investigation, authorities offered a reward for information leading to a solution to the case. The reward grew each month, and by December 2005, it had reached $60,000. The governor then added another $20,000 to bring the case to the attention of the public. Despite many clues, all were dead ends, and the case remained unsolved for many years. In 2007, Johnny's parents decided to take matters into their own hands by looking into changes in state law. They noticed that the killer's fingerprints and DNA did not appear in any databases, which raised suspicions about his brutality. They assumed that the killer had a criminal record, so they investigated Tennessee law. Through their investigation, they discovered that, according to Tennessee law, fingerprints and DNA samples could only be collected from convicted criminals. So Jania's parents expressed their desire to change this law. They played a key role in drafting a new law that required fingerprints and DNA samples to be collected from all people arrested for violent crimes. After gaining support from the government, the law was passed in May 2007. 2 months later, a breakthrough occurred. Police arrested 22-year-old Taylor Lee Olson for violating the terms of his probation. Olson had a criminal record, including theft, check forgery, and auto theft, and had been arrested several times. Surprisingly, however, police had never collected his fingerprints or DNA. Olson lived with his girlfriend and newborn daughter, but he continued to commit crimes. 5 months earlier, police had begun investigating Olson for his suspected involvement in the murder of Jania. However, they had not been able to analyze his DNA at the time. But after Olson was arrested for violating his probation, police decided to question him about the details of the Jania case. Olson eventually confessed to his role in the murder and voluntarily provided a DNA sample. The DNA test showed that Olson's sample matched the one found in the victim's apartment. Additionally, Olson's fingerprints matched the fingerprints on the murder weapon. Olson claimed that he intended to steal Jania's car that night and entered the apartment through the back door to look for the keys. When he entered Jania's room, she woke up and began screaming. In a panic, Olson grabbed a kitchen knife and attacked her multiple times. Olson insisted that he had no intention of killing anyone and that the incident was an unfortunate accident. Investigators were suspicious of some of the details and suspected that Taylor had planned to kill Jania in advance. They believed that he may have been following Jania for some time, which was supported by Jania's friends reporting that someone was following her in a car at the time. Although there was no concrete evidence to prove this, this became more credible after Olson was arrested. When Olson's trial was scheduled to begin in mid-2008, he hired an attorney. His attorney advised him to withdraw his original confession, and Olson gave a new account to investigators. According to this new account, Olson claimed that he had entered Jania's apartment with his friend, Noah Cox. When Olson entered Jania's room to get his car keys, Jania allegedly woke up, grabbed a knife, and stabbed Olson multiple times. Olson then fled through the back door while his friend entered Jania's room, disarmed Jania, and killed her. Taylor Olson's new story raised suspicions among police. They found no fingerprints or DNA of others at the crime scene, leading them to believe that no one else was involved. Detectives waited for the trial to begin, but it never did. On March 28, 2008, Taylor Olson committed suicide in his jail cell. Along with him, detectives found several suicide notes addressed to his family, Jania's relatives, and the police. In the letter to detectives, he accused his friend Noah Cox of being the real culprit and apologized to Jania's family and his family. However, detectives still believed that Olson was responsible for the murders. They questioned Noah several times but found no evidence implicating him. Jania's parents were also skeptical of Olson's final confession. They felt that if Olson was truly innocent, he would not have committed suicide. Olson had consistently maintained that he had entered the apartment alone for months after his initial confession. His sudden change in story to blame his friend raised further suspicions. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Tara Baker. Tara Louise Baker was born on January 20, 1977, in East Point, Georgia. Her parents got divorced when she was a child, and her mother later married again. Tara had 2 younger brothers and a younger sister, making her the eldest of 4 siblings. From an early age, Tara showed a strong interest in the law and aspired to be a lawyer or judge. She demonstrated this by conducting mock trials with her stuffed animals, creating contracts with family members, and she also writing letters to politicians. She even wrote to the President of the United States once to complain about his speech interrupting her favorite TV show. After graduating from high school, Tara attended Georgia College, where she earned 2 bachelor's degrees in just 3 years, graduating early. She then enrolled at the University of Georgia in 1999 to pursue further education. The university, located in Athens, was one of the top law schools in the country and was conveniently close to her parents' home. Just a few hours away. Because not wanting to live in a dorm again, Tara opted for off-campus housing. She rented a room in a house that was divided into 3 separate rooms, sharing the space with 2 other university students, one of whom was a familiar face from her college days. Tara was employed at a respected law firm in downtown Athens, which enabled her to pay her living expenses and gain valuable work experience in her chosen field. In January 2001, at the age of 23 and in her second year of studies, Tara spent a significant amount of time at the university library. The evening of January 18th followed this pattern. She and a friend went to the library, where they studied for several hours. Around 7:30 p.m., her friend left for home, but Tara chose to stay longer. At about 9:46 p.m., Tara called her friend to check that she had arrived home safely and mentioned her intention to leave the library in a few minutes. The next day, Virginia Baker, Tara's mother, got a phone call. The caller claimed to be a detective and asked if Tara had ever been arrested, explaining they needed her fingerprints. Virginia initially thought it was a prank call and hung up. But then she called the Athens police station to verify. They confirmed the caller was a real detective and told her there had been a fire at Tara's house. Virginia, still confused, asked to speak to Tara. The detective said they couldn't locate her and had found an unidentified body in the house, which is why they needed Tara's fingerprints. At the crime scene, investigators searched for evidence, but the room was badly damaged from the fire and water. It was later discovered that some items that survived the fire were not checked for fingerprints. Tara's laptop was missing from her room, which was unusual since it was a bulky item and other valuables were left untouched. This raised suspicions that the motive might not have been a robbery gone wrong. With no signs of forced entry, investigators suspected that Tara may have known her killer and let them in. The detective provided more information, stating that only one of Tara's roommates had been located so far, and that person was not at home when the fire occurred. However, the other roommate and Tara herself remained unaccounted for, leading investigators to suspect that the unidentified body might be one of them. When Virginia asked the detective to describe the room where the body was discovered, the response left her stunned. The detective explained that the room was packed with antique items, which was consistent with Tara's long-standing hobby of collecting such things. Tara's family rushed to Athens, hoping that the situation was a misunderstanding and that Tara was safe. Upon arrival at the police station, they were left waiting for hours without receiving any updates. Eventually, a detective met with them and delivered devastating news. The body found in the house was Tara's, and she had been murdered, not a victim of the fire. The detective, claiming exhaustion, declined to answer their questions at that time. However, before departing, he revealed that Tara had unknowingly left behind a crucial piece of evidence, fragments of the perpetrator's skin under her fingernails, which could potentially aid in identifying the killer. Tara's relatives were shocked and devastated by the news of her murder. The police refused to provide them with more information, despite their repeated pleas. Desperate for answers, the family made multiple attempts to contact the police, but were continually rebuffed. In fact, the police department never reached out to the family on their own, forcing Tara's relatives to repeatedly call and visit the station to gather scraps of information. Over time, they were able to slowly piece together some details of what had occurred. Tara's family discovered that firefighters may have inadvertently destroyed crucial evidence while extinguishing the blaze, a common occurrence in such situations. The firefighters' primary objective was to put out the fire and potentially rescue survivors, unaware that a murder victim was inside. Furthermore, the investigators failed to secure the crime scene after finding the body, allowing unauthorized access to the area. As Tara's relatives sought information, they faced resistance from the police, who were unwilling to keep them informed about the investigation. The family was also subjected to rudeness and unprofessional behavior from the authorities. In an effort to document their interactions, they began recording conversations with the police and filed complaints against local investigators, but this did not yield any results. The family decided to investigate Tara's death on their own and enlisted the help of a well-known criminologist. However, the local police department would only share case materials with him if he agreed to keep all information and findings confidential, even from Tara's family. For 10 years, the family was unable to obtain Tara's death certificate. They finally received it after writing to the state governor. But the certificate did not provide a detailed cause of death, only stating multiple injuries. Determining the exact time of death was difficult. Medical experts estimated it to be between 10 p.m., when Tara left the library, and 11 a.m., when neighbors called the fire department. However, it is likely that the crime occurred closer to the morning hours, as the fire did not take long to spread. The police investigation found witnesses who reported seeing a middle-aged white man running down the street on the morning of the murder. He was only wearing a t-shirt and jeans, which was unusual given the winter weather. Additionally, the police discovered that a few days before the murder, a man who sounded heavily intoxicated called Tara's university and asked for her phone number. The university had a phone number that students and faculty could call to request student information, such as phone numbers. The intoxicated-sounding man was only able to write down Tara's phone number correctly on his 8th attempt. The investigation into Tara's murder raised several suspicions, but the identity of the man involved remained unknown. At the time of her death, Tara was in a relationship with a boyfriend. Despite his confirmed alibi, the police were hesitant to clear him of suspicion. They continued to scrutinize him, making late-night calls to him and his parents, requesting that he travel to a nearby city for further questioning, DNA sampling, or a polygraph test. Notably, it was Tara's boyfriend who was tasked with identifying her body. He had been living in another city but promptly arrived in Athens upon learning of the fire, even though Tara's parents were already present in town. When the police asked the boyfriend to identify the body, they took him to the house but did not let him enter. A police officer went inside, took a photo of the body, and showed it to the boyfriend on the camera screen. The boyfriend was shocked and said he could not be certain if it was Tara. He mentioned that he had given her earrings, and if he saw them, he would know for sure. The officer went back inside, removed the earrings from the body, and showed them to the boyfriend. Only after seeing the earrings did the boyfriend confirm that the body was Tara's. The police then focused on another man, a student in Tara's classes with a troubling reputation. Several female students came forward and reported that this individual would often ask girls out on dates and not accept no as an answer. He had also asked Tara out multiple times, despite knowing she had a boyfriend. Some girls reported that he exhibited creepy behavior, making them feel uneasy. Despite investigating this person, detectives couldn't find any evidence connecting him to the crime. In a contentious move, they even asked Tara's friends to monitor him, but it yielded no results. Investigators also considered another suspect, an attorney at Tara's workplace. They discovered that just before the murder, he began acting strangely. This attorney had been part of a close-knit group of colleagues who regularly socialized outside of work. But he abruptly stopped participating in their gatherings. Moreover, just days before the incident, he had informed Tara that he would be unable to attend her birthday celebration, which was set to take place the day after the murder. On January 19th, before the fire began, one of Tara's colleagues attempted to persuade him to change his mind and attend the celebration, as Tara valued their friendship and was hurt by his sudden refusal. The colleague visited his office but found him absent, which was unusual given that his workday had already started. He was typically present in the office during morning hours, but not on that particular day. The colleague also checked his schedule, wondering if he had meetings, but it was empty. He failed to show up to work that day, but the following day, he visited another colleague's house and acted strangely. Many people who knew the attorney suspected he regularly used illicit substances, which may have contributed to his erratic behavior. However, another detail raised more suspicion. His colleague noticed several fresh scratches on his neck. It was previously discovered that skin particles from the perpetrator were found under Tara's nails, indicating she likely scratched her attacker. The attorney claimed the scratches on his neck came from a cat and denied any involvement in Tara's murder. His behavior became even more bizarre when asked who he thought committed the crime. He suddenly became agitated, shouting that it was Tara's father, but failed to provide any explanation or evidence to support this accusation. A further unusual circumstance was the sudden resignation of the attorney a few months after the murder, followed by his departure from the state. It remains unclear if the police ever compared his DNA to the samples found under the victim's fingernails or if these samples were even analyzed. As with other aspects of the investigation, the detectives did not disclose any information, not even to Tara's family. Subsequent police findings revealed that the attorney had been discreetly involved with two female colleagues from his workplace, despite the fact that he got married. This discovery could potentially explain his peculiar behavior and unexplained absences from work. Additionally, both women claimed they were certain he was using illegal substances. Police found no evidence linking the lawyer to the murder, clearing him as a suspect. A maintenance company with access to a spare key was also questioned, but yielded no results. The case has seen little progress, with authorities keeping investigation details confidential to avoid impeding progress. Over time, several potential leads emerged in the case. A witness came forward claiming to have seen an African-American man outside Tara's house a few hours before the fire. Another person mentioned noticing blood on a notebook belonging to one of Tara's university classmates shortly after the murder. Despite investigating these leads, police were unable to make any progress. Tara's parents offered a $77,000 reward for any information that could help solve the case. However, as the years passed, the team of detectives working on the case changed multiple times, and the new investigators were unable to crack the case. The primary challenge was the lack of evidence, as the fire and the subsequent actions of the firefighters destroyed nearly all potential evidence in Tara's room. In 2019, a podcast covering Tara's 19-year-old murder case was released, bringing together her family, key individuals, and all known information about the crime. This sparked renewed interest and caught the attention of the police department, who began communicating more with Tara's family. As a result, the police re-examined the case, although no new breakthroughs were made. The podcast continued to cover Tara's story for 2 years, ultimately having a substantial impact on the case's progression. The Georgia government introduced a bill to reduce the number of unsolved cases in the state, partly due to Tara's case. The bill was named after Tara and Rhonda Coleman, an 18-year-old woman from Georgia who was murdered in 1990 and whose killer remains unknown. Although the two murders are unrelated, the initiative was called the Coleman-Baker Bill. In 2023, the bill passed unanimously, and the governor signed it in Athens, accompanied by the families of both victims. The law created a special unit within the Georgia Bureau of Investigation to focus on unsolved cases. It also gave victims' families the right to ask police to re-examine these cases and take new steps to solve them. After the law passed in 2023, a unit was formed to investigate Tara's murder. Detectives re-reviewed all available information and re-examined the limited evidence using modern DNA analysis. This process took several months until a breakthrough was announced at a press conference on May 13, 2024. After 23 years, police revealed that the perpetrator had been caught. The culprit was identified as 48-year-old Edric Lamont Faust. Investigators did not reveal the exact methods used to identify him, but stated that advanced DNA analysis and biological evidence were crucial in the process. To avoid compromising the ongoing legal case, they withheld specific details, which will be disclosed during the trial. The arrest documents listed multiple charges against Edric, including assault, which may have allowed for a DNA match. Additionally, skin cells found under the victim's nails may have been analyzed using modern tools to extract the killer's DNA. As for Edric, his extensive criminal record, which included numerous arrests for various offenses, should have put him in the FBI database long ago. At the time of Tara's murder, Edric was 25 years old and lived in the same city as the victim. However, the police found no evidence to suggest that Edric knew Tara, leading them to believe he may have broken into her home or tricked her into letting him in. Edric was not a suspect in the case until a few days before his arrest, when new DNA analysis methods brought him to the attention of detectives. He is currently in jail awaiting trial. The evidence the police have against him will be revealed during the trial process. The fact that Edric was denied bail suggests that the detectives have obtained conclusive DNA evidence. The police are certain that Edric is responsible for Tara's murder, and as a result, her case is now officially closed. There is currently no verdict for Edric. He was charged with 1 count of premeditated murder, 4 counts of aggravated murder, 1 count of burglary, 2 counts of aggravated sodomy, 1 count of rape, 1 count of aggravated assault, first-degree arson, and possession of a knife during the commission of a felony. Tara's family finally has closure after 23 years of searching for the truth. They expressed gratitude to the new team of detectives who helped solve her case. In contrast, Rhonda Coleman's case, which the law is also named after, remains unsolved. However, her family may now feel hopeful that new evidence will be uncovered and justice will be served, just like in Tara's case. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of April Jones. On October 1, 2012, April Jones, 5, was playing outside her home in the Bryn Aeg housing estate in West Wales. It was around 7 p.m. Normally, April's parents wouldn't let her play outside so late, but she had received excellent grades the day before, so they gave her more time to play. April played outside with her friends for about 20 minutes before heading home. However, she did not return home at 7 p.m., as scheduled. Her parents last saw her riding her bike and immediately began searching for her. They soon found her 7-year-old friend not far away, but April was nowhere to be found. April's friend told them that April had gotten into a car with a man wearing a green jacket, with blue eyes, brown hair, and a beard. A key detail was revealed by the young child, who showed intelligence beyond her years. She reported that April had gotten into the car on the driver's side. However, as the steering wheel is usually on the right in British cars, this would suggest that the car in question had a left-hand drive. Despite the time of night, the police were quick, arriving on the scene just 8 minutes after the 999 call was made. As search teams gathered, police interviewed anyone who knew April to gather information about her disappearance and to see if anything unusual had happened in the days leading up to her disappearance. They tried to piece together the events surrounding her disappearance. The family could not think of any information that would assist the police in their search. April had attended swimming lessons earlier that day and was allowed to play outside with friends when she returned home. However, April had only been missing for a short time, but it was late fall and it would soon be dark, making it very difficult to find her. News of the incident spread quickly through the neighborhood through word of mouth and social media. Hundreds of locals rushed out of their homes to help in any way they could. Despite their good intentions, this actually made the police's job more difficult. While they were grateful for the community's support, they still had to go door to door to find out if anyone had seen April or who might have kidnapped her. The problem was, with so many people out trying to help, most of the houses were empty, making it difficult for the police to gather information and conduct their investigation. The story quickly gained widespread national attention and attracted television crews and reporters from across the country to the small town. Police provided a 10:30 update to the public and media, expressing concern that they had still not found any evidence or leads of April. Police urged anyone who may have seen or known anything about April's disappearance to come forward immediately. April Jones was born on April 4, 2007. Despite a happy childhood, April faced a number of health problems in her early years due to being born 7 weeks premature. However, with medical care, she was able to overcome most of these problems and have a normal childhood. One condition that April has not overcome is cerebral palsy, a brain disorder caused by trauma during or shortly after birth, usually due to lack of oxygen to the brain. The condition affects April from the waist down. Fortunately, it is not too serious. However, the condition causes pain and difficulty with simple muscle movements. Even with a mild condition, she still needs careful care. The most worrying thing is that her kidnapper may not know about her small defect, which may not be important to them. On the evening of October 1st, the police released more details about April's disappearance. Specifically, she was last seen wearing a school polo shirt and purple jacket. More than 100 people, including local residents and volunteers from the UK, have gathered to assist the police in the search. Locals who are familiar with the area may be very helpful in locating her. Others have traveled from South Wales to assist, showing their desire to help find April. The search area near the town was vast and dangerous, spanning 60 square kilometers of mountains, waterfalls, gorges, dense forests and uneven terrain. Severe weather conditions, including heavy rain and overcast skies, made the search even more difficult. To ensure their safety, police carefully organized volunteers into several search teams. For 8 hours, teams braved the weather and traversed the difficult Welsh countryside to find April. The outpouring of support from the volunteers was a testament to the compassion of the community and brought some comfort to April's family as they anxiously waited by the phone for news. Police initially banned the family from participating in the search, fearing they would be fined. As the situation became more desperate, with April still missing, the police issued a child rescue alert on October 2, 2012. This alert allowed the police to share vital details about April and her abductor with all UK police agencies. As a result, the entire nation learned of the case for the first time. 14 hours after April went missing, the media put enormous pressure on the police. They also raised questions about the police's handling of the investigation. It could be argued that the criticism of the police was unfair. Despite the harsh weather conditions, the police quickly organized search parties and searched for April throughout the night. Considering the circumstances, it is unlikely that they could have done more that night. After Inspector Andy John took over the investigation, he provided the public and the media with regular updates. He also erected barricades and directed officers to set up checkpoints. During the investigation, posters with April's picture were distributed in the hope that someone would come forward with information. Police received numerous reports from local residents and people in the surrounding areas. In reviewing these reports, one name was mentioned repeatedly: Mark Bridger. Several witnesses identified a local man named Mark as a potential suspect. He was known to drive a Land Rover, had blue eyes, and a short beard. He was also notably left-hand drive. Several witnesses reported seeing Mark or his vehicle in the area at the time of April's disappearance. Police tracked down Mark's last known address and made numerous attempts to contact him, but neither he nor April were found there. Mark notably had no criminal record. Although some residents claimed to have seen Mark during the first night search for April, it was difficult to confirm due to the large number of volunteers involved. Currently, the police are focused on locating him. Helicopters circled the area as police conducted a thorough search of all possible locations where he could have been. They learned that Mark had recently moved into a new house called Mount Pleasant. There was no sign of life to the police when they arrived. The house did not have any cars. They entered the house and called April's name, but she did not respond. At that time, it was unclear whether Mark had been hiding from the police. However, at 4:30 a.m., they issued a statement announcing his arrest. A police plane spotted him walking with his dog along a country road, not far from April's family home. He appeared to have tried to change his appearance by cutting his hair and shaving his beard. The helicopter guided the police patrol car to his location. When the police stopped him, the officers asked him his name, and he answered truthfully, without hesitation. They then asked, "Where is she?" Mark responded by explaining what had happened, saying, "It was an accident. I accidentally hit her with my car, and I don't know where she is." They then took him to the nearest police station in Aberystwyth. Meanwhile, in April's hometown, an extensive search operation was underway. Police units, K9 search teams, volunteers, and mountain rescuers scoured the Welsh countryside, searching every area thoroughly. Despite their tireless efforts and determination, April remained missing. Along with a hardworking, determined team of emergency services, hundreds of volunteers from across the country stayed up all night, slept for a few hours, and then resumed the search. The police received a huge response to their appeal for help, with over 600 people offering their support and suggesting potential search locations. This allowed the police to deploy a large team of volunteers who, with their local knowledge, were able to meticulously search over 20 separate areas. While the public can sometimes inadvertently hinder an investigation, local expertise is essential in remote locations like this, and the police need all the support they can get. At this point, the police have arrested Mark Bridger and are questioning him. During questioning, Mark admitted that he had been drinking and was in the area at the time of the incident. He saw two girls riding bicycles and remembered a dark-haired girl passing behind him. Mark admitted that he hit April with his car while he was intoxicated. Mark claimed that he never meant to hurt April, although he admitted that he knew he had made a mistake. According to him, he put her in his car because he believed she needed immediate hospital care. But when Mark saw, her lips turned purple. He realized that his actions had led to April's death. Mark even claimed to be friends with her parents. Although he was initially cooperative, his memory suddenly began to fail. He could not remember anything about what he had done to April's body. Although the police attempted to question him, Mark insisted that he had amnesia and could not provide any further information. The police intensified the interrogation and pressured Mark. It was clear that he was not being truthful. As a result, the police began to doubt whether April was really dead. The police decided to have Mark recount the events that happened the previous Tuesday, the day he was arrested. And they planned to use this opportunity to extract more information from him. When questioned, Mark said that after getting out of the car, he saw April underneath, which made him think that he had run over her. However, the police received information from a 7-year-old child who was with April. She said that April was fine and had voluntarily gotten into Mark's car. April even smiled. This information contradicted his testimony. Mark changed his tone, saying that he did not know that the police had a young witness who had witnessed the entire incident. However, this witness's testimony contradicted Mark's account, making him clearly upset. Despite his emotional state, Mark continued to stand his ground against various interrogation techniques. His testimony remained the same, and nothing changed. The police consulted Dr. Joe Sullivan, a leading expert on body language and criminal behavior. To gain a deeper understanding of the suspect and create an accurate psychological profile, Dr. Joe not only observed Mark's interviews but also visited his home. This thorough examination revealed surprising insights. Mark had an arsenal of knives, handcuffs, and handguns in his home, some hidden and others openly displayed. Dr. Joe described Mark as a daydreamer with a distorted view of reality, imagining himself as a Rambo-like character. This meant that he had difficulty separating his daydreams from the real world. However, Mark disagreed with Dr. Joe's assessment. Mark would not change his story now. Their only chance was for forensic experts to thoroughly search Mark's home. The search found small traces of blood in the bathroom, possibly from Mark bleeding while shaving. Police sent blood samples to the lab for analysis, a process that could take up to 24 hours to get results. Dr. Joe informed the police of his assessment of Mark. He was unlikely to feel empathy or guilt for his actions. He would therefore not respond to appeals to conscience or feel remorse. Therefore, the police should not expect Mark to show remorse, sympathy, or guilt when answering their questions. The police took Dr. Joe's advice to heart. After the police discovered sensitive and disturbing images of children on his laptop, Mark was immediately arrested. As a result, Mark began to suspect that the police knew more than they were letting on. 3 days after April went missing on Monday night, her parents received heartbreaking news on Thursday. The police had given up hope of finding April alive. With heavy hearts, her parents had to tell their children that the search for April was no longer a rescue mission but a murder investigation. And the family would have to accept the loss of their little sister. Meanwhile, the police had instructed the volunteers who had been searching for April to return home and let the professionals handle the situation. This decision was met with strong opposition from the volunteers who did not want to give up. Hundreds of volunteers, exhausted and frustrated, left the search site after finding nothing. On the 4th day of April's disappearance, police search teams combed the area for clues. According to forensic investigators, there was no evidence that Mark had killed April. And, importantly, there was not a shred of evidence that Mark's story was true. An examination of Mark's Land Rover revealed no signs of damage, no blood, no hair, and no skin. There was no evidence of injury to April. According to Mark's testimony, there should have been signs of injury to April, such as scratches on the vehicle or blood inside, but none were found. Mark attempted to downplay his involvement by claiming that he did not see any blood on April after her collision with his car. He asserted that despite being run over, she did not appear to have any visible open wounds. The lab then contacted the police on Friday at 6:15 p.m. with crucial evidence. They had compared DNA from April's toothbrush to blood found in Mark's bathroom, confirming that it was April's blood. Additionally, the collar of Mark's fleece jacket and jogging pants, which he had been wearing, also contained April's DNA. When police questioned him, the photos were discovered on his laptop. Mark claimed that he did not find the content attractive. Mark was shown photos depicting the exploitation and manipulation of minors in a sexually explicit manner. When confronted with his internet search history, Mark denied looking for illegal sites for personal gratification. By Saturday, Mark had been detained for 3.5 days. Police had a total of 96 hours to question him. As the time limit for questioning him was running out, the case was transferred to the Crown Prosecution Service, which will decide whether to proceed with prosecution. Police questioned Mark several times about the disturbing images found on his laptop. As the investigation continued, they struggled to find new ways to persuade him to reveal the truth. When asked if he wanted children, Mark replied that he did not want to be a father. The police then asked, "Did you masturbate to these pictures?" Mark denied it. Mark initially remained calm, but his demeanor began to collapse as the conversation progressed. He flew into a rage and began swearing, clearly upset that someone had suggested he was a pedophile. The case was then referred to the Crown Prosecution Service for further action. The Crown Prosecution Service eventually allowed the police to charge Mark Bridger with the abduction and murder of April Jones, just over an hour after Mark's final interview. When the charges were read to him, Mark showed no emotion or remorse. Over the next 2 weeks, forensic investigators searched Mark's home and found traces of blood that belonged to April. The fireplace was also searched, where a number of badly decomposed bones were discovered. However, due to their poor condition, it was not possible to determine for certain whether the bones belonged to April. A jury found Mark Bridger, 47, guilty on May 30, 2013, for the kidnapping and murder of April Jones. Sentenced Mark Bridger to life in prison without parole. After the trial, April Jones' body was never found. Although 17 bone fragments were discovered in Mark's home, none of them could be positively identified as April's. April Jones' death has left a permanent void in her family's hearts that will never be filled. While her family and friends are working to rebuild their lives, the pain of their loss will continue. A funeral was held in April's hometown on April 26, 2013. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Rachel Anderson. Rachel Anderson is a 24-year-old female born on January 28, 1994, in Warren, Ohio, to William Bill Anderson and Patricia Trish Anderson. She has a younger brother named John, who was favored by the family. Rachel graduated from Warren Harding High School in 2012, where she was a member of the National Honor Society and played on the soccer and volleyball teams. From a young age, Rachel aspired to become a funeral director, a unique career choice. She moved on to Youngstown State University, focusing on the study of deceased individuals. Her dedication to her studies earned her recognition as one of the top students, along with a scholarship. Following this, she attended the Cincinnati College of Mortuary Science, graduating in 2016 with a Bachelor of Science degree in Mortuary Science. After joining the Ohio Funeral Directors Association, Rachel relocated to Columbus to start her internship at Shaw Davis Funeral Home. She took her role seriously, believing it was her responsibility to help the families of the deceased. As her internship was nearing its conclusion, Rachel hoped to become a permanent employee at the funeral home. However, her dream was suddenly and tragically shattered. Rachel's body was taken to the morgue, and investigators began interviewing the first witnesses. The autopsy on Rachel revealed the details of the brutal assault she suffered that night. She had been both strangled and stabbed. Specifically, she had a cut on her scalp and fractures at the base of her skull. The stab wound entered through the back of her neck and penetrated the left side of her brain, indicating extreme force that caused a portion of her skull to break off. The autopsy also found that she had been strangled with a cord from an electric blanket. The strangulation caused bleeding in her sternoclavicular muscles and eyelids, and the blood vessels in her eyes had burst, leading to noticeable redness. Forensic evidence revealed bruises and red marks on her ankles and wrists, indicating she was alive when the perpetrator tied her up. A DNA sample was discovered on the rope and Rachel's body. The coroner who conducted Rachel's autopsy determined that her death resulted from a stab wound to the head and neck, despite the initial theory suggesting strangulation. After interviewing various employees from Rachel's workplace and her ex-boyfriend, who had an alibi, the police continued to explore different possibilities regarding the attack. Detectives returned to Rachel's apartment to search for evidence or clues about the perpetrator. On the living room floor, they discovered Rachel's purse, which was missing her wallet. 2 weeks after the crime, Rachel's mother found the 9-inch steak knife used to stab her in a box in her apartment. However, the brutal nature of Rachel's torture suggests that the perpetrator was not simply a thief, but a psychopath who enjoyed abusing his power over his victims. Investigators explored various motives, but initially had no suspects. The details of Rachel's death were kept confidential to protect the investigation. Eventually, DNA samples were collected from different parts of Rachel's body and the crime scene. Unfortunately, these samples did not match any samples in the Special Services database. The video footage from street surveillance cameras captured 2 individuals using Rachel's car to drive around the city after her death. During this period, cash was withdrawn from her debit and credit cards. Location data identified a phone number that was in Rachel's apartment between 7:59 p.m. and 9:25 p.m. on January 28, 2018. Analyzing the evidence revealed the caller's whereabouts at various times. Once the account associated with the phone number was identified, investigators found the suspect, 54 years old Anthony Pardon. He had a criminal history that included multiple rapes, robbery, kidnapping, and attempted murder. Overall, he served 33 years in prison for his crimes. Anthony had a difficult upbringing. He was initially raised by his grandparents and later moved in with his mother. As a child, he was diagnosed with conduct disorder and antisocial personality disorder. In March 1979, at the age of 14, Anthony was briefly committed to the Ohio Youth Commission. By July of the same year, he was placed under court custody and transferred to Franklin County Children's Services. In December, he was again found guilty of making threats, leading to another transfer to the Ohio Youth Commission, where he was placed in foster care. In 1980, Anthony was charged with abuse, involving his foster parents' 15-year-old son. Then, he informed Columbus police that he committed the crime because he was upset after an argument with his girlfriend. As a result, Anthony was convicted as a juvenile. On November 13, 1981, when Anthony was 16, he visited his girlfriend's 39-year-old mother to use the telephone. During this visit, he threatened her with a butcher knife, assaulted her, and stole $100 from her purse. He tied her hands and feet, gagged her, and placed her in the trunk of his car. He drove to Valleydale, where he untied her feet and threw her into the river behind the Valleydale Ballroom. When he noticed that the partially clothed she was able to stay afloat, he entered the creek and held her head underwater. Fortunately, a passerby intervened and scared him away, allowing she to survive. Anthony fled the scene before the police arrived and used the money he had stolen from her to buy tennis shoes and jogging clothes. In May 1982, at the age of 17, he had been convicted of other crimes in Franklin and received a prison sentence ranging from 5 to 25 years. While incarcerated, he committed several rule violations, such as possessing a weapon, setting a mattress on fire, and engaging in fights. He ultimately spent more than 24 years in prison for his offenses and was released in November 2006. After his release, Anthony relocated to Georgia and applied for a job using a different name. In 2007, Anthony was charged with forgery papers and convicted in Floyd County within a 9-year prison sentence. After serving his time, he received 20 years of probation and were required to wear a GPS ankle monitor. He was released from prison in 2017 and returned to Ohio in June of that year. According to an interstate agreement between Ohio and Georgia, he was supervised by the Adult Parole Authority and had to report to the Sheriff's Department every 90 days. The Ohio Adult Parole Authority did not give him a monitor, as the judge had requested. And Anthony was free once more. On August 21, 2017, he was found with a sex worker in his car, and 6 days later, he was caught driving without a license. During that traffic stop, police discovered he had a kitchen knife and a shotgun, but for some unknown reason, or due to police negligence, he was not arrested. Therefore, he is still continuing to commit crimes. CCTV footage captured Rachel's car parked outside a store. A man exited the passenger side of the car and entered the store. The driver was not visible in the footage. This makes the investigation more difficult than ever. However, after visiting the store and speaking with the employees, the police were able to identify the man. He was named Slits. A few days later, Slits was questioned at the police station. He said an adult man passing by approached him and offered to exchange his ex-girlfriend's card for cash. He agreed to this arrangement, which made him a co-conspirator in the Rachel case. Slits confirmed the identity of Anthony and detailed the entire route they took on the evening of January 28, 2018, while trying to cash in Rachel's stolen cards. The issue at hand was to locate and arrest Anthony. On February 9, 2018, after several days of track at Anthony's sister's house, he was successfully apprehended. The 54 years old, who had a history of crime, faced 9 charges, including burglary, aggravated robbery, kidnapping, rape, and aggravated murder. The trial commenced on February 4, 2020. On the first day of the trial, 4 witnesses provided their testimonies. Among them was Jonathan, a co-worker of Rachel, who found her body. He, along with the manager of Rachel's apartment complex, shared their accounts. The jury also heard testimony from Officer Frank Scani, who was parked outside the apartment when Jonathan discovered the body Rachel's and reviewed the surveillance footage. On February 5, Rachel's brother, John, and Special Agent Joshua Durst took the stand. Lead Detective Art Hughes testified the following day, on February 6. On that same day, Anthony expressed dissatisfaction with his attorneys to the judge and requested new representation. He appeared to be deliberately delaying the proceedings. On Monday, February 10, the prosecutors called a fingerprint expert and other specialists to explain how technology helped determine where Rachel's debit card was used and at the crime scene. Anthony's sister testified that he gave her Rachel's debit card, claiming it belonged to his girlfriend. She later discovered, through news reports, that the card actually belonged to the crime victim, Rachel. The final day of testimony was Tuesday, February 11. The medical examiner reported finding Anthony's DNA at the scene, while a forensic pathologist and a deputy coroner from the Franklin County office detailed Rachel's injuries. In the courtroom, the final moments of Rachel's life were carefully reconstructed. She celebrated her 24th birthday on January 26 and 27, 2018. Her brother, John, traveled from Warren to Columbus to visit her. The following day, she and John went to the home of her friend and colleague, Jonathan, where they held a birthday party for she. After a long night of celebration, Rachel and her brother stayed overnight at their friend's house. The next morning, Rachel left for work, leaving her apartment key with her brother. On the 28th, John returned to his hometown and accidentally brought Rachel's house key with her. At around 1 p.m., Rachel texted John, person holding her house keys, to let him know she would come over to pick it up. Rachel talked to her mother around 6:30 p.m. and then went to John's place to get her key. Since her apartment door could only be locked from the outside with a key, she had to leave it open. After stopping for dinner at her favorite restaurant, Rachel arrived back at her apartment around 7:30 p.m. She then left the apartment, and Anthony was waiting for her outside. He kidnapped Rachel, taking her from the ground floor to the top floor. He used force to pin her down, then tying her legs with a hair dryer cord and her hands with a belt and curtain cord. Once she was unable to move, he wrapped a curling iron cord around her wrists to silence her and gagged her. He forced Rachel to provide him with the PIN numbers for her cards. He tortured her and exploited her vulnerability. Ultimately, he strangled her with a cord from an electric blanket. In addition to strangulation, he also caused blunt force trauma and inflicted a stab wound to her head. Afterward, he concealed her body in a closet, leaving her naked from the waist down with the electric blanket cord around her neck and the door handle. Anthony stole her car and used her bank cards at various stores in Columbus to make quick money. The defense did not present any witnesses. The final hearing took place on February 12. Assistant Prosecutor Amy Van Kullen gave the state's argument, outlining the timeline of the crime and telling the jury that Anthony murdered Rachel in cold blood. In his argument, the defense attorney, Larry Thomas, admitted that Anthony used Rachel's cards but said that he was not responsible for the murder. Attorney Larry argued that the state's case was based on mere speculation. He said that DNA evidence and cell phone data were not enough to prove Anthony's involvement in the crime. The jury, consisting of 4 men and 8 women, spent about 6 hours over 2 days discussing the case, before finding him guilty on all charges. The prosecution sought the death penalty because he killed Rachel during a burglary and he had previously been convicted of the attempted murder of a similar woman. They opted for the death penalty instead of seeking clemency because of his extensive criminal history. Prosecutor O.B. Bryan remarked that some individuals cannot follow the law, and Anthony is one of them. The sentencing phase of the trial started on February 18th. The defense aimed to lessen the severity of the punishment by highlighting Anthony's difficult childhood, but this argument was not effective. Prosecutors contended that the negative factors in the case were more significant than any positive ones. Additionally, it was established during the trial that Anthony understood his actions when he assaulted Rachel. Testimonies in Anthony's defense were given by his mother, sister, a psychologist, and his former elementary school teacher. On February 19th, Anthony gave a 13-minute speech before the jury, sharing details about his abusive childhood. He shared the struggles he encountered after his release from prison, expressing feelings of hardship and despair. He claimed that the law system let him down and that he received no support. And he attributed his current situation to the failures of the justice system. However, he neither addressed the crime he committed nor offered any apology in his remarks. On February 20th, after 3.5 hours of deliberation, the jury was unable to reach a consensus on whether to recommend the death penalty. Instead, they decided to recommend life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentencing occurred on March 16, 2020. Rachel's mother cried in court when the verdict was announced. Her father issued a sharing his thoughts on the investigation he had witnessed over the past few years. He was shocked to look a dangerous repeat offender making outrageous demands and acting as if he was entitled to something. He also was astonished to see an adult complaining about the system's shortcomings while trying to evade responsibility. Judge McIntosh sentenced Anthony Pardon to 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole, one for aggravated murder and another for violence. Furthermore, he received an additional 63 years for aggravated burglary, kidnapping, aggravated robbery, and several violent offenses. These sentences are to be served one after the other. Rachel's 24th birthday turned into a tragic day. A young woman with a bright future ahead of her had her life unexpectedly cut short. She was finishing up her internship and was on the verge of receiving a promising job offer. Rachel was laid to rest at Pineview Memorial Park, leaving her family and friends struggling to cope with the sudden loss. Every year on January 28, Rachel's family and friends light a candle at home to remember her. Rachel was a lively person with a beautiful smile and a loving heart. She was kind and always willing to help her friends. Throughout her life, she had many interests, but her main focus was her career. Rachel was naturally compassionate, loved dancing, and cherished time spent with family and friends. She had a special love for children and valued her life, which was sadly taken away too soon. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Carrie Farver. In 2012, Dave Kropa, 34, moved to Omaha, Nebraska to start managing an auto repair shop he had recently inherited. Shortly before this, he separated from his wife, Amy Flora. They have 2 children together, and for the sake of their children, they remain on good terms and see each other regularly. Dave is trying to find a new woman to date, so he created profiles on several dating sites. He is friendly, sociable, and easygoing, so there are many people who want to meet him and want to start a relationship with him. At that time, he did not want a long-term or serious relationship, and he was content to enjoy fun moments with women. On an autumn day in 2012, Carrie Farver visited Dave's auto repair shop to have her car checked. Carrie was a 37-year-old, single mother. She has a 14-year-old son, and he is aiming to become a programmer in the future. When Dave met her, he was instantly infatuated with her and asked her out on a date. But she declined, saying he wasn't her type. However, he was captivated by she and wanted to get her attention. He later found her online and sent her a message. Although she didn't respond immediately, she eventually replied, and they started communicating. When she returned to the repair shop for more work on her car, he invited her to dinner again, and this time, she accepted. Carrie was a very cheerful, independent, and energetic woman. In school, she was among the top students, and teachers believed she had a promising future. Carrie was close to her mother, dear friends, and acquaintances. She always wore a smile and never gave up, no matter the situation. However, her life changed significantly at age 22, when she became pregnant by her boyfriend. Her boyfriend didn't like this, and he refused to take responsibility for raising the child. This didn't deter she, though. She quickly decided to keep the baby, become a single mother, and will not depend on boyfriend. She paused her university studies to find a job. She then moved into an apartment near her mother, Nancy. She also graduated from college and eventually got a job in IT with a higher salary. Being a mother came naturally to her, and her life revolved around her son, Max, and she chose not to pursue new relationships, dedicating herself entirely to her child. Dave's first date with Carrie went very well, and she was delighted about their time together. She later shared with a friend on social media that she hadn't laughed so much in years. Their conversation flowed freely and naturally, as if they had known each other for a long time, and Carrie was eager to continue the relationship. Furthermore, Dave also wants to build a romantic relationship with she. He even confessed that he was in love with her. He decided to stop talking to others on dating sites for her. However, before Dave met Carrie, he knew another woman named Shauna Elizabeth Gollier, who went by Liz. She was the first person he met online after divorcing his wife. He found her to be a sweet and cheerful person. Both had children around the same age, and she expressed interest in having an open relationship, similar to Dave's desire. She managed a small business and took care of housework. They felt very compatible, so they saw each other regularly for the past 6 months, maintaining a sexual relationship. Over time, Liz became more and more difficult. She wanted to spend more and more time with Dave. However, he doesn't like it, and he would rather communicate with other women. This causes their relationship to deteriorate and he begins to distance himself from her. However, Liz kept interfering in his life, often giving him unsolicited advice, which stressed him out. Liz also knew that he had been dating different women before he met Carrie. She felt very dissatisfied with all the women he dated. Dave wanted to break up with his girlfriend, Liz, and suggested she date other people. However, she refused to break up and has deleted her dating website. She became jealous of other women, including Carrie, and even of Dave's kids and ex-wife. As a result, he frequently had to reassure her. During a date with Carrie, Dave noticed missed calls and texts from Liz. Liz insisted on entering his apartment immediately because she forgot something there during her last visit. Dave told her he was with his girlfriend and couldn't let her in right then, but he can do it after he gets home. However, Liz kept pressing him to let her in, claiming she urgently needed her belongings. In the end, Dave agreed. He and Carrie returned to his place. When they entered the house, Liz showed up, pounding on the door and angrily demanding entry. Of course, this situation clearly ruined their evening, but Carrie sympathized. She suggested that Dave resolve the issue with Liz first, then they could go to her house where they wouldn't be bothered. And they did just that. Dave opened the door, returned Liz's items. Then he and Carrie left together. Carrie's trip back to Macedonia, Iowa, took about an hour. In the morning, she told Dave she was happy with their current relationship arrangement. She didn't want a serious relationship, marriage, or children. She just wanted to enjoy their time together. This understanding brought them closer, as they shared similar views on relationships. Their relationship thrives on mutual understanding. Dave found she very attractive, smart, and charming. Over the next 2 weeks, they saw each other every day. Even though she lives in a neighboring city in another state, but she still visits him during the day to have lunch or spend time together. She often stayed overnight. She had a high-paying job, holding a key position in a large IT company. She dedicated most of her time to work and her son, leaving only a small portion for leisure. This perfectly aligned with Dave's lifestyle. In early November, Dave started considering whether to change his main rule and move in with Carrie. Around the same time, while in Thailand, Carrie received several friend requests on social media from strangers. She noticed one request came from someone in her hometown of Macedonia. She sent a message asking if they knew each other, but never got a reply. This felt odd, so she told Dave, but they didn't think much of it. On November 13, 2012, Dave woke up early and saw Carrie working on her laptop, finishing edits on a new project she was set to present to management that day. She kissed him goodbye and left, planning to meet him again in the evening. During the day, Dave got a message from Carrie asking if he wanted to move in with her. This was surprising because just a few days earlier, they had agreed not to live together but to continue their relationship casually. Although Dave had been considering the idea, but he felt uncomfortable with this, so he politely declined. He reminded Carrie of their previous discussion to keep things as they were for now. However, the other person responded with a barrage of insults, showing outright hatred for him. The messages were filled with hysterical threats, indicating that the relationship with his dream woman was likely over. Dave was stunned by her words and didn't recognize the person he loved. Consequently, he cut off all communication, went home after work, and noticed that none of Carrie's belongings were there. He assumed she had broken up with him and taken all her belongings with her. A few days later, police officers arrived at the auto repair shop where Dave worked. They informed him that his girlfriend, Carrie, was missing. Dave was the last person to see her alive. He had kissed her goodbye in the morning before she left for work, but she never arrived there. Since then, no one had been able to reach her. Dave told the investigators he had no idea what had happened to Carrie and shared their last messages. He explained that she had communicated with him in a very rude manner that day. Upset by her tone, he ended their conversation. This later troubled him as he wondered if it was truly Carrie, who was always polite, sending such messages. Detectives then spoke with Carrie's relatives, piecing together some incident from that day. On the morning of November 13, 2012, Dave had left home after kissing Carrie goodbye as she prepared for work. Later, Carrie's mother, Nancy, received a worrying message from her daughter, saying she had broken up with her boyfriend, Dave, and was in a mental hospital due to a nervous breakdown. This alarmed Nancy, who panicked when she couldn't find Carrie in any hospital. Meanwhile, Carrie failed to appear at work on an important day when she was supposed to present a new project, raising further concerns for her safety. Later, Carrie's employer received a message stating that she had accepted a new job in Kansas and would no longer be working for him. This news surprised the management because she takes her work very seriously. Additionally, Carrie's son, Max, also received a message from she, saying she was going to her brother's wedding. However, the wedding took place without her. These conflicting messages worried her family, colleagues, and friends because they didn't seem true. No one believed she would leave her son and relocate to another state just for work. It seemed that she was either hiding something or in trouble. Concerned, her relatives decided to file a police report about her disappearance. Dave was completely confused by what was happening and can't believe it. He allowed the police full access to inspect his car and mobile phone. He actively cooperated with the investigation and tried to help in the search for his beloved, Carrie. He told police that his relationship with her had only begun a few weeks ago, but they had become very close during that time. Carrie was always calm, but after her disappearance, he began receiving aggressive messages with insults and threats on social media. The police believed him because he voluntarily cooperated with them. He was clearly very upset about her disappearance and successfully passed the polygraph test. He had no reason to harm his beloved. The detectives informed Dave of something important regarding Carrie's. They revealed that Carrie had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Without medication, she might experience psychotic episodes, which could explain the unusual aggressive messages. Detectives explained that if Carrie ran out of medication while she was with him, she might lose control and have an episode. Once she was found, and her medication resumed, these issues would cease. This reassured Dave, and he promised to inform the police if she contacted him again. However, soon after, Dave regularly receives annoying messages, with threats and insults from anonymous social media accounts. These messages often targeted women connected to Dave. The number of such messages reached 60 per day, and the variety of accounts and platforms used to contact him kept increasing. Receiving threatening messages left Dave extremely scared. He reported these threats to the police. An ex-girlfriend of Dave's also told police that she had been sent similar threatening messages after the first date with him. She received threatening messages that if she continued to see Dave's, her child will be in danger. So she cut off contact with he. The situation worsened when Dave's friends began receiving messages accusing him of abusing women. These accusations spread widely, including on dating sites, causing him to receive a series of hostile messages from strangers. Dave had to defend himself, explaining that the accusations were false and lacked any evidence. Dave's life turned into a nightmare. People avoided and despised him. Meanwhile, Carrie, a woman he knew had been missing for over 3 weeks, and the police were unable to trace her movements, phone, or bank card transactions. Everyone believes she is dead. But her relatives need to find her body and find out what happened to their daughter. Dave continues to be terrorized, so he is forced to contact the police again. However, they were actively investigating his girlfriend's disappearance, and they did not have the resources to investigate the threatening messages he received. In January 2013, Dave accidentally discovered Carrie's Ford Explorer in a parking lot near an apartment building. But it was empty. He immediately reported it to the police, who then inspected the car. The car had a scratch on one side, but there were no fingerprints on the vehicle's exterior or on the steering wheel, not even Carrie's, as if someone had intentionally erased them. However, a single fingerprint was found on a can of mints inside the car, but it didn't match any records in the national database and wasn't Carrie's. The car was very clean, except for a small pink stain on the passenger seat, resembling a spilled strawberry smoothie. After the inspection, the car was returned to Carrie's parents, who later sold it. Meanwhile, the threats against Dave become more and more terrifying. Dave kept receiving photos of the window with messages that the sender had a spare key and intended to break into the house and harm him. They also sent Dave's photos of his children with threats. Afterwards, they even threatened his neighbor. He even received a photo of a woman resembling his neighbor tied up in a car trunk. Frightened, he called his neighbor to ensure she was safe. She said that she was actually at home. During these times, Dave tried to dismiss the threats and hoped it would all end soon. This tense situation drew him closer to his neighbor, who was also targeted by the attacker. Dave and neighbor girl began to communicate with each other more regularly and share their experiences and worries. Often, while watching movies together, they would simultaneously receive threatening and insulting messages on their phones. After receiving several threatening photos, including some pictures of his children, Dave contacted the police again. However, the investigators seemed indifferent and did not take any action to resolve his problem. Frustrated, Dave submitted a report to a special unit in Omaha that handled such cases. Unfortunately, this department had only one specialist, who was overwhelmed with 94 cases and unable to assist him. Feeling desperate, Dave had no choice but to accept the situation and try to move on. He began to suspect that someone with mental health issues was behind the harassment, but he had no evidence to support this theory. Carrie's father had passed away, and her family grew increasingly worried when she missed the funeral. Instead, they received a text message with an apology from her, but no one had heard her voice for months. Carrie's family sensed that something was wrong and suspected that she was not the one sending these messages. In the spring of 2013, a man contacted Carrie's mother, Nancy. He tells Nancy that Carrie called and told him she was in a homeless shelter and wanted to be picked up. Nancy reported this to the police, and together they went to the shelter. Then they went there together, but they found out that Carrie wasn't there and she had never been there. Through the court, Nancy has been awarded custody of Carrie's son, Max, who had been living with them all along. Meanwhile, Dave and the neighbor's relationship becomes troubled. They constantly broke up and reconciled. She is increasingly annoyed and makes Dave uncomfortable. Ultimately, they ended their relationship in August 2013 because he doesn't want to build a serious relationship with she. Soon after, Dave's garage was vandalized. A few days later, Dave discovered that the house neighbor girl was renting had caught fire. The fire wasn't severe, so the rescue team was able to save the house, but the facilities need to be repaired. Tragically, a cat perished in the fire, prompting she and her 2 children to temporarily move in with relatives. She also informed the police that Carrie, who had threatened her, was the one responsible for burning down her house. Subsequently, Dave received a bizarre message, purportedly from Carrie, claiming she was pregnant. Knowing this was impossible, as he had undergone a vasectomy years earlier and was incapable of having children, This made him suspicious about whether Carrie was really the one who sent him the message. Moreover, Carrie had had a hysterectomy, making it impossible for her to be pregnant as well. 2 months later, a bright orange sign appeared at Dave's auto repair garage, accusing him of mistreating women. In January 2014, Dave's longtime girlfriend visited him at night. A few hours after they went to bed, someone threw a brick through the bathroom window. This incident caused Dave to become extremely stressed, and he realized that the situation had gotten out of control and become dangerous. Because the police did not take action, Dave decided to leave and move to a different house. He found a new job, changed his phone number and all his contact details, and bought a firearm for protection. As a result, he disappeared from public view for a long time and did not contact anyone. However, then, he registered on a dating site under a different name and arranged to meet a new girl. The girl never appeared at the date. Instead, he received a threatening message from Carrie. It turned out the girl also received a similar threat, which is why she didn't attend the date. Dave's neighbor girl also received an email expressing anger. It was from someone named Amy Flora, which was Dave's ex-wife's name. She suspects that Amy might be the one behind everything. Unable to reach Dave, so she contacted the police and reported the stalking. This theory seemed plausible, because Amy has every reason to hate Dave for the divorce. During this time, Dave's gun vanished, indicating a possible break-in at his house and he could be in danger. He reported this to the police. As the situation got out of control, the police finally decided to take a closer look at the stalking. Their main focus is investigating Carrie's disappearance. When they questioned Dave again, they knew that he had nothing to do with her disappearance. With new details, the investigator doubted that Carrie was threatening her boyfriend and others. They don't understand why Carrie, who has been dating Dave for about 2 weeks, would threaten him and everyone around him. She even left her entire family, their home, and their successful job for him. It didn't add up and shows that someone may have kidnapped her and stolen her identity. On December 5, 2015, Liz Gollier, an old girlfriend of Dave's, called 911. She reported that she was attacked while walking home late at night through the park. She saw a shadow in the darkness before being attacked from behind and asked if she liked Dave, followed by a gunshot. Liz identified her attacker as resembling Amy Flora, Dave's ex-wife. The attacker shot her in the leg but then disappeared into the night. Luckily, Liz's injury was minor, and she was taken to the hospital. The police visited Amy to verify details and determine whether she was responsible for the shooting. However, Amy denied any involvement. During the investigation, the police discovered that Amy had received numerous threats from an unknown woman. Amy said that she had recently started communicating more with her ex-husband, Dave. This led to her receiving a series of threatening messages, telling her to cut off contact with him. She allowed the police to search her house, but they found nothing suspicious, and she had an alibi at the time of the attack. Detectives verified her alibi and confirmed the threatening messages, leading them to remove she from the list of suspects. Despite this, Liz insisted that Amy was the attacker. At the same time, Liz could not explain how she could see the shooter's face clearly in the dark when she was in a state of fear, and no one believed her claim. To confirm her statement, Liz brought with her a printed message confessing to the attack, which Amy emailed to her. This confession contained very detailed information about Carrie's abduction. On the morning of November 13, 2012, Carrie logged onto her social media page at approximately 6:45 a.m. The next time Carrie logged in was 3 hours later, to unfriend Dave. According to Amy's confession, this was when she abducted Carrie. Email sender accurately described Carrie's tattoos, including one not listed on the missing persons flyer. Email claimed that Carrie had suffered wounds in the abdomen or chest area, was then burned beyond recognition and disposed of in a trash bin. It also included details about Carrie's car and house that hadn't been publicly shared, leading police to suspect that the letter's author had actually seen her body. They concluded that Carrie had been murdered over 3 years ago. But they believe that Amy did not do it, and they do not even believe that Amy herself would write a confession letter and sign it. It all looks like an unprofessional staging. The investigators were suspicious of Liz Gollier, who had provided an email from Amy, is the mastermind behind Carrie's kidnapping. A check of Liz's phone revealed that she had deleted some information. They found out that she was using an app to encrypt her location, making it hard to trace the origin of the messages. Nancy, Carrie's mother, got involved in the investigation. She believed that the messages sent to relatives by Carrie before she disappeared were written by someone else. This was because they contained grammatical mistakes and had an unusual writing style, unlike Carrie, who was always polite and articulate. Then, the police discovered that Liz had become obsessed and lost her sense of reality. She shot herself, all in an effort to terrorize Dave. It's hard to believe, but investigators keep trying to uncover the truth. Dave was shocked to learn about Liz's deception. For 3 years, she managed to conceal her actions, sending over 15,000 messages, dedicating 50 to 70 hours a week, like a full-time job. She used the timer to make sure she always had an alibi. Her actions stem from her possessive feelings towards Dave. She didn't want to share Dave with other women and was determined to win him back at any cost. Detectives began carefully questioning Liz after she was released from the hospital following a gunshot wound, with the hope that collecting information will help speed up the investigation process. Liz was interrogated, and she seemed very angry. She aggressively insisted that Amy should be jailed because posed a danger to society. Liz presented new letters purportedly showing more confessions about killing Carrie, revealing details such as Carrie being killed in her own car from the passenger seat. However, the detectives knew these claims were false and that Amy was not involved. They told Liz that Amy was now with Dave to observe her reaction. As expected, she became furious and lost control. The police continued telling Liz they needed evidence to charge Amy. They tried to link Amy to Carrie's disappearance, as Liz had accused Amy's. Liz began sharing more and more details about the crime. How did she know all this? The police located Carrie's car, which Carrie's parents had sold, and obtained permission from the new owners to inspect it. During the inspection, they removed the seat covers, revealing a large blood stain on the seat and smaller stains beneath it. DNA analysis confirmed the blood belonged to Carrie, who had disappeared 3 years earlier. They also discovered DNA traces belonging to Liz. This further increased suspicion towards her. Later, the investigation uncovered thousands of photos on Liz's computer. Most of these were selfies, but one photo showed a leg with signs of decomposition. The police identified the leg by tattoos matching those of Carrie. After a lengthy investigation, they discovered that the IP address used to send confession emails and threats supposedly from Carrie was linked to a person named Gareth. Liz's ex Gareth believed his beloved to be Shauna Gollier for many years. Little did he know that Liz was weaving conspiracies and a web of lies around the story of Carrie's disappearance. During the inspection of Garrett's house, the police found nothing of interest. However, a search of Liz's previous home uncovered new evidence. Officers discovered several mobile phones and electronic devices, including a camera owned by Carrie. It was confirmed that one of the phones was used to call Carrie's mother. This phone had a voice-changing app installed. Detectives also matched fingerprints found on a candy pack in Carrie's car to Liz's fingerprints, and they match. Liz's actions were incredibly cruel. She cruelly sent messages to Carrie's mother and son, giving them hope that Carrie was still alive. This deception went so far that Max, Carrie's son, wrote a message 3 years after his mother's disappearance to the number from which he last received a message from her. He wrote that if she was really his mother, she should come back because he wanted her to be with him at his graduation. Based on this evidence, Liz was arrested in December 2016. She was charged with first-degree murder, concealment of a body. Her defense team opted for a judge to decide her guilt, rather than a jury. The prosecution argued that she stabbed Carrie to death in November 2012 in Carrie's own car. They claimed Liz lay in wait for Carrie as she left Dave's house and attacked her when she reached her car. The prosecution presented all the evidence pointing to Liz's guilt. Another disturbing story about Liz's emerged during the trial. Liz once had a young son named Cody. Cody's father, who had a mental disability, cherished his son. When Cody was found unconscious, it was determined little boy died from shaken baby syndrome. Cody's father confessed to the crime and was imprisoned. However, his family believed Liz was the true perpetrator and had manipulated the father into confessing. Additionally, it was revealed that this was not Liz's only instance of harassment. After breaking up with another man, she stalked his new girlfriend, continued even after they married and had a child. On August 15, 2017, Liz Gollier was found guilty on all charges. She, however, did not admit guilt for any of them and showed no remorse. Her lawyer sought leniency, requesting a sentence of no more than 30 years with parole eligibility after 15. However, the prosecution argued that Liz lacked humanity and did not merit a reduced sentence. Consequently, she received life imprisonment without parole. Liz continues to deny her guilt and is appealing the verdict. Carrie's family never recovered her body, which remains missing. They long to find her remains to fulfill her wishes of cremation and scattering her ashes.